Welcome, everybody, to MogTalk, episode 201. Today is November 7th, 2020. If you're unfamiliar with MogTalk, it is a show based around the Final Fantasy XIV community, discussing everything from Savage Raiding to Chocobo Racing. Today's topic will be on mental health, but before all that, I do want to introduce the guests that are on the show, so you guys can know who they are, and they won't just kind of sit there awkwardly looking at you, although Spofie and Gouka will constantly have the same face at you the entire show. First off, let me go ahead and introduce the newest guest that we have here, Dr. Ryan Kelly. Could you tell everybody who you are?
Yeah, so I'm Dr. Ryan Kelly. I'm a psychologist, and I do a lot of research and paneling at comic and gaming conventions. Psychology of gaming, comic books, anime, and a lot of the books we tend to write are related to that, including recently Psychology of Final Fantasy, which just came out a few months ago. I'm also the co-founder of Geeks Like Us. It's a community-based media company that focuses on inclusion, mental health, unapologetic enthusiasm, and it's basically everything psychology, gaming, and geekdom.
Okay.
So yeah, happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you here, and hopefully give us a little bit of insight, and maybe again, like we were talking about the 3 therapy on the show today. And so we have returning with us, we have two other guests. First, Spofie, could you tell everybody who you are?
Sure. I'm Spofie, or my name is Sophie, so I kind of just go by both. I stream 7 nights a week here on Twitch, and I have been for like 3 or 4 years now, or we're coming on 4 years, during the evening time, and I play a lot of 14, but I just like RPGs and stuff like that in general. So, and we have a big focus on like inclusivity and like focusing on like kind of like comfy stuff in stream.
And which is exactly why I thought we'd bring you on. We do have, again, and thank you, by the way, Sophie, for coming on. We do have one other guest that we're bringing on, Gouka, and I'm going to let Gouka introduce himself. I won't tell everybody who he is.
I am a washed-up raider. I am a has-been, a used to be, a was. But yeah, actually, that's what it is, actually. Okay. I didn't have anything more than that. I used to lead Elysium during the Heavensward era. I quit at the end of Heavensward. And yeah, I've just kind of lingered around and somehow not gone away.
I appreciate you haven't gone away yet. So anyways, we have a very large variety, well, I would say a decent variety of guests here. Myself, Frosty, you guys know me as the person who runs the podcast here. We all have different experiences, and this week and this month and this year and everything has been a huge hurdle in mental health for a lot of us. And some of us, most of us in the community probably got good news, but not, maybe not all of us. We're not all the exact same person. But it has been a pretty interesting day. I wanted to do this show because I felt like mental health has definitely been an issue that needed to be discussed within the Final Fantasy XIV community. There's lots of positive things about mental health with MMOs, and there's also a lot of negative things. And I want to make sure that we are aware of all this. And so we have a handful of topics. We're, of course, going to talk about politics because that is involved in all of our lives right now, and this is something that does affect our mental health. We're also going to talk about our community and inside the game, outside the game, and everything else. And we may be not able to hit every single point we want to, but we are going to have a fun discussion either way. And to start this off, I would like to go ahead and jump into what many people who know me as would call a very happy discussion, which is the state of the political affairs, how it has swung today and everything else. But it's good for me, but it's not good for everyone. If we talk about Final Fantasy XIV, we do have people who support Donald Trump in Final Fantasy XIV. We have people who don't support him. I think it mostly is people who don't support him because that's just the type of demographic that is in the game. And we have to have these difficult conversations every once in a while. I've had multiple difficult conversations with people recently, and it turns into just fuck you, we're at your throat. And I don't know how to have that kind of civil discourse. And I guess I want to pose this question to Dr. Kelly here first. Is it even possible in like the political landscape right now to have like a civil discourse with someone of the opposite affiliation?
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely is. The main question is it possible to change the mind of others? And maybe not, but I think what sometimes happens is we get so focused on I need to change their opinion,
Hmm.
and we subscribe to a myth that we can do just that, that the dialogue turns into this immovable object hitting an unstoppable force, and tension just builds and builds and builds until something breaks, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, you can absolutely have an exchange of different ideologies and different opinions. And if there are certain, parameters of respect and boundaries set before the discussion starts, and rules even proactively that can be made, for sure you can. Right? But I think we basically have three states of mind. We have an emotional mind, we have a rational mind, and then we have a wise mind, which kind of connects both.
Hmm.
Rational is not always good because we'll come off a little cold, and emotions are important to try to communicate. Emotional mind is not so great because we don't think rationally. It's just very reactive. So you want the combo. And I think most people are either in an emotional mind right now, or they're in a rational mind. There's not a lot in the middle. And I think our environment has kind of led to that.
Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
go ahead, Sophie.
I've found that I've discussed kind of issues with different people on Twitter, and I know Twitter is you're already limited by a character count, right? So it is limiting in and of the platform. But a lot of times, even outside of this election, just when it comes to anything that would be considered political, it kind of comes down to I'll be saying one thing and the other person will be saying something. And then we are in like a 10-piece thread where we're both just saying the same thing over and over. And then it's like, okay, well, we're not really getting anywhere.
Yeah.
So,
So I've had this conversation, and I'm one of those people, and I have an issue. I think this is a issue of myself, is that like I don't want someone to hate me. And so, and it becomes a flaw. I mean, a lot of people don't want people to hate them, right? I mean, that's common. But I get kind of obsessive sometimes about it, and I push myself a little too far. Like, I've gone into just private conversations with people who support Trump, and I'm like, let's have this discussion. Let's hit all these different facts. And it just hits that wall of like, well, this person said this, and it's just like, it doesn't ever go anywhere. I feel like there's no way, like you said, I don't feel like there's any way I can convince them. And afterwards, I'm like, okay, I guess hopefully we find common ground later. The conversation turns into them throwing jabs here or there and everything else. And I'm like, well, I got to cut this guy off now. I can't have him in my mental space right now where he's just constantly trying to throw these jabs, which will set me off and make me not want to have a rational conversation because I'm so tired. Conspiracy theories have been a huge part of really wrecking my mental state because there's so many of them out there, and it has affected me because there's people around me, family-wise and otherwise, that have been falling into these traps of things like QAnon and all the other stuff out there, and they're so far gone that when I see someone like trying to support and push it, I get angry, and I just can't have that conversation anymore. And I don't know if that means anything to you guys, but it has been an issue for me recently, and I am having to cut off people that I would otherwise have a great conversation with if I didn't know they supported Trump and all these conspiracy things and everything else. Gouka, do you have any experiences that you would like to throw in there?
So it's pretty interesting because I don't actually use social media as much as I used to back in like 2017, 16.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have a extension that limits my time on social media during the weekdays to about 5 minutes so that I'm not exposed to this as much as any other people. But I've never run into the situation where followers or people that I know are supporting Trump, even though I understand that when you have a larger base, you have like 5,000 people following you, it's going to be a lot higher chance of running into those people.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that one of the flaws in all of these topics of conversing with the other side is that there's this idea that you're going to change their mind. And I remember reading studies since the 1950s, started by Stanford, I believe, where they were saying that when you present facts to people, they double down on their position. And this is like sometimes in the literature called traditional canvassing, I believe. And it's kind of this idea that you are going to present something and try to convince them. But the new thing that's been gaining traction, I believe, is called deep canvassing, which is mostly, it's about empathizing with the other person before thinking about changing our minds.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I think it is kind of flawed to go into these conversations thinking that you're going to change their mind is, if you went into that conversation, is there a thought in your mind that you're going to walk out of that conversation supporting Trump?
Right. No,
Right.
I get it.
Yep. No, that was very well said. I think it's to add to that a bit. There's something called the backfire effect, and we saw it most largely with the Bush campaign with weapons of mass destruction, where Bush in his campaign had said, "Yep, there's WMDs in the Middle East," and largely the right believed it. Keyword believed, right? It wasn't fact-based. They didn't need it. Actually, Republicans in general subscribe more to beliefs and faith-based thinking than critical thought or fact-based thinking, and Democrats the opposite. But so they believe it. And then even when George W. was on that big freighter saying, no, there's no WMDs over there, and gave some facts, people actually believed more that they were over there, because you can't argue against someone who has a belief by using facts. It doesn't register, right? You have to do it. You got to somehow subscribe to their belief or try to play to that. And is it Gouka? What is it?
Gouka.
Oh, Gouka.
Gouka. Sorry. I just want to say Goku every time I see your name.
Yep.
To what Gouka is saying is, it's not. No one wants to be told they're wrong. Even if they are wrong, people are going to clam up and they're not going to admit they're wrong at best, right? They'll be quiet and not admit they're wrong at best. Humans need reflective listening. It's the first thing you're going to do in marriage counseling, how to actively listen, how to reflectively listen. And there's this idea that you can't emotionally validate people without validating their opinion. For instance, if someone's, let's take like a KKK member or a Proud Boy, maybe something a little less, a Proud Boy, saying of how they feel so oppressed by the government and all this stuff. Well, you might subscribe to the fact that you're not systematically oppressed. You're just not, right? But the best way that you can try to get them to come around and start to accept your opinions a bit is by validating that emotion. Oh, that would feel awful, right? If I felt that way, I can kind of see where you're coming from. You're not agreeing with the position, but that person is feeling oppressed, right or wrong. And that's an awful feeling. And if you act like that's invalid, then you're invalidating them. And that's just basic human nature. And if you do validate the feeling without agreeing with their stance, they're going to be more likely to validate your feelings and try to come around, and maybe in the very least you leave, some kind of mutual understanding.
Right.
So I guess like to go off of that, something that has kind of been going on in my community in particular that I've been struggling with this week is people have been coming into my Discord, people from my community. And for example, it started out back on Tuesday with people kind of saying, I didn't vote. And people are upset with me for it. And I don't think that they should be upset with me. And then I kind of came out and was like, well, I understand why people are upset with you. And like, I think that it's a privileged position to not vote. Oh gosh, sorry.
It's okay.
So then after that, it became a couple of people coming in and being like, I voted for Trump and people are mad at me. And I don't think I should have to have people mad at me for that. And it became like these constant, like little, like having to, like this kind of like moral decision between standing up for like what I believe in, but also like considering them being in my community where I was like, I really I am like against everything this person is saying, but I'm not just going to like remove them from my community for their political views. But also there's other people in my community that are now being negatively affected by what they're bringing here. And it became this thing where like, I didn't want to invalidate the feelings of all the people in my community that they were essentially invalidating by coming in and being like, I don't care about your rights, essentially. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, and so something that I've been thinking about and I've looked into a little bit is, we all want to be tolerant of people and tolerant of other people's beliefs and everything else. But there is that whole theory of like, you can't be completely tolerant because then you let the intolerant in and the intolerant take over and then there's tolerance no more, right? So there's a level of intolerance everyone needs to have. And it sounds horrible, but you have to not tolerate some things in order for your world to be okay. You need to make sure it's a decent and morally understanding level of tolerance. Then not tolerate people coming in saying racist stuff and killing people and stuff like that, right? That's intolerance. You're not tolerant towards that.
Sure.
And so I guess in the end, I feel like that's something that we all have to learn to accept and move forward with, that we're all going to have to be intolerant of some people, right? Am I wrong?
No. I think I might amend it just a bit. If
Sure, please. Yeah.
I think there is absolutely room and a necessity to be intolerant of certain ideas, certain thought processes, certain actions, certain policies. I think when you begin to be intolerant of people in the sense of their feelings or past or experiences, it can become problematic simply because it's not like, if it was a situation where we could simply include or exclude the intolerant, that would be a little different. Mm-hmm. They're in this country, right? So when you're thinking, do you have the right to cut people off and be intolerant of intolerance? Absolutely. You have every right to, and I get it. But is that going to be effective from a systems change? Probably not. Historically and psychologically and sociologically, probably not. Mm-hmm. So that question of, do I have the right to do it? And saying yes to that, but then also having that second question of, is what I'm doing going to be effective to promote progress and change? I think is very important. And there's an idea, I think, with empathy where when you're looking at one's emotional intelligence or ability to be empathic, it's the measure of that is not how well are you empathic of people who you understand, right? People who you can get their pain, you can understand their pain. The true measure of empathy is understanding people that are totally different than you, who maybe even hurt you, right? One of the greatest exercises or practices of empathy is forgiving someone who hurt you. Again, you don't have to, right? Mm-hmm. You're not bad for not doing that. But I think that could be something to aspire to of, can I sit here and think about something who so neurologically and instinctually I disagree with at a core level, and I hate and I can't stand them and they're an awful person, but then trying to hold on to that small flame of, I have no idea their experience. They have thoughts and feelings. They might not be as educated as me. They might have had a loved one who told them this for years, and it was their one loving adult that, in their life that taught this for years. And then they died and they're not letting go. I think that's something important to consider.
Yeah. No, you're right. Go ahead, Gouka.
I was just going to piggyback off of that. This is actually something that's taught in a lot of persuasive writing. At least, in my colleges and high schools, I don't know if other people had other experiences, but one of the fundamental things that we're taught is you have to exercise a lot of empathy when you're writing in order to be more persuasive. And the idea is that if you're able to think about the topic from the opposition's opinion, you can more readily address concerns that they'll have. And so you will be in the middle of writing the paper and you'll get to a part and you'll say, okay, well, someone who disagrees with this paper and is reading this is going to start thinking X, Y, Z. And then at that point in the paper, you're supposed to say, okay, let me address this because that's exactly what's running through their mind. And the more articulate and empathetic you are with this technique, the idea is supposedly the more persuasive your paper will become because you're no longer leaving things on the table that are unaddressed.
Good point.
Yeah. I would like to say, while we're all talking about like politics and everything else, this is something that we're going to be running into. There are going to be people in the community that are Republican, in Final Fantasy 14. We're not all just Democrats out there. So is our point of view to be like, all right, if you support Trump, fuck you, and I'll never talk to you again? Do we need to get to that point for our own mental health, or do we need to get to the point of where we learn how to find similar ground? Because that's difficult. That could be very difficult and a very dirty, messy situation to try to get to someone at that level, or get to someone be in the same level they are, have that discussion, and be peaceful the entire time. And it takes a lot of energy. So I don't know, Sophie, this is something that I'd like to ask you, since you do deal with a pretty large, inclusive community as well. I mean, do you have a policy on politics and like Trump, people who support Trump and everything else?
So I think that's kind of been the struggle, because I guess, and this was kind of going through my head as I heard Dr. Kelly talking about like empathy for people who have different opinions and stuff. Is my problem, my big block is when I'm in a situation where I can see what's like, someone has a differing opinion and I can like hear what they're saying, but also like I'm empathizing for other people that I feel like the words that they're saying are hurting. And so maybe it's not like directly affecting me what they're saying, like it could be, but if I feel like it's going to directly affect someone else in my community, and like it's you know, bigoted towards them or something, or their views are directly opposition to like who some of the other people in my community are, like it's really hard for me to accept someone coming in and like saying like, you know, they support Trump and a lot of like the things that Trump puts out there, you know?
Mm-hmm.
No, that's a very good point. There's a very big difference between a one-on-one discussion versus when you're a big streamer like you, and you have to really keep in mind community management, because that is a bit of your job. You know, I think that's hard to find. And I would also say, you know, for streamers like yourselves, and you had said this. Do you go by, what do you go by actually? Frosty.
Just Frosty.
Okay, I'm just making sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Realized I had never asked you that. It was so rude.
It's okay. No, it's
but you know, you had sort of said this, whether right or wrong, or what's the best way to do it, or how do you be more effective. Partly it does have to do with your mental health and the mental health of your community. So if you feel like, you know what, I can't be around this. I'm burning out. When I'm around it, it's like either traumatizing me or making me depressed or making me agitated. And I just right now can admit I don't have the emotional energy to deal with this dissent in my community, or my community is struggling to deal with this kind of thing. Then maybe there does need to be a type of, I don't want to think of it as like a mass banning, but a type of boundary to set, like Spofie was saying, of like, all right, you know what? For now, here are some new community rules. We just don't talk about it. They're just going to set this boundary because we don't have the energy. You know, there's no problem with that. It's an important thing to learn how to do, set boundaries.
Yeah, and then I think there's also the side of it where it almost feels hard setting that boundary, because it does, like, if you really like believe in something, you don't want to like not speak up for that, I guess.
Right.
I don't know. For me, I've been having this like big, like, in my stream, we've been not talking about it, but in Discord, people can talk about it. And so it's kind of been this like dichotomy between those two things, and just trying to like, this is the first time that I would say my community has really like talked about politics, since, even though like, I don't think we like held a strong rule against it, but there was kind of a rule. We didn't really like go into it. But obviously, I mean, it's so relevant right now. It just feels weird to be like, okay, don't talk about it, you know? Because it's like,
right.
Yeah. I mean, it sucks. Go ahead. Goes Gouka.
Personally, I've been through this song and dance over the past, I want to say 5 years, because it's kind of similar to leading the, back then, what was the largest endgame rating community. You have a lot of different personalities, a lot of, bigotry and people thinking they're the best, and you kind of have to navigate through that ocean. And back then, my method was, try to be as accommodating as possible. And it's kind of like the whole Obama speech, when they go low, we go high. And around I would say more recently, those walls I had to put up to deal with that type of behavior kind of shattered at some point. And I had this talk with Keo, whom I don't think anyone here except for Frosty knows.
I know very well.
Yeah. And, we came to this agreement that I have not set up my boundaries properly. I was just letting people kind of walk over me and trying to, basically serve them and their needs and their happiness first and foremost. And it kind of reached a point where it was so bad that I felt it was almost a debt in a sense. Like if they were able to do this to me for this many years, 5 years going, then, if I do it to them once, they should be able to take it. Right. This kind of this mentality of, you take what you dish. And this is kind of my input. I would say put your boundaries up sooner, because if you allow people to do that for many years going on and you're just letting it ride and it's not good for you, then it's just going to fester more and more as the years go on. So I would definitely take a look at that and just think, what am I willing to tolerate and not willing to tolerate, and just go from there.
I mean,
No,
go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say, I think that's well said. There is a resource I want to let you all know about. So with the company I run, Geeks Like Us, we recently paired with Guardians of Mental Health and Geek Therapeutics. Geek Therapeutics is a number of psychologists who train people to use geek in gaming and therapy, other clinicians. And we had made this streamer mental health kit that we've been working on with a few people, and having a few people that are directly using it. Like Anxiety Marie's been great. But there is a course training that you can take, and it's a full year. It's like a year subscription of like $35. But it has a bunch of psychologists, Twitch streamer researchers. We actually have researchers who that's all they do is research streaming and Twitch and Parasocial Relationships. Dr. Emery Daniels runs that. But we also provide 2 free services. One is a great bot for Discord channels that I can let all of you know about, where it's got a lot of really great features like !depression, and it shows all about depression, what it is, resources, hotlines. It even has an Autobot back and forth for people who are going through a tough time in your Discord, in case you want that to have a boundary there. But and then on Geeks Like Us in our Discord, we have streamer peer support groups, and they run at the non-affiliate, affiliate, and partner level. Some are, these larger ones that people can just accumulate, and mental health professionals, streaming researchers, and so on come in, and we have issues we talk about every week or month. Where we talk about how to set boundaries according to research and communication styles to help you with your individualized. And you can also request kind of these private streaming groups with a few people that might have similar things. I know, Spofie, you're a big advocate of mental health and self-care. Anxiety and Strange Rebel Gaming, also very big in that. Gamer Doc, some other people we work with. So
yeah, Anxiety's awesome.
Oh, Marie's great. And so pairing, people who have similar initiatives, similar purposes. And the point of it is, as mental health professionals, as doctors, as researchers of streaming and parasocial relationships, we want to help the community set these boundaries, because, like you were saying, Gouka, it's like, it's hard to know what to do and how to set it. And even if you kind of learn, I have to set it early, then the question is like, well, so how do I appropriately set them? How do I balance my principles with my own personality? What am I capable of? That can be incredibly hard. And for streamers like you all, you who have a focus on the well-being of your community, well, when the buck's got to land somewhere, sometimes it's a bit self-sacrificial, and you jeopardize your own self-care and your own well-being for others, and eventually you're gonna, we burn out. We've seen it time and time again.
So that's actually a good point, and this is exactly the next point that I was planning to go to, but it is a point that I would like to go ahead and discuss. And some is the fact of mental health with streaming. It's a huge deal. I've thought about it plenty of times, because you're talking about those parasocial relationships. It's actually, a lot of people don't think about that, and a lot of people who are coming up in their streaming, they have no clue about any of that psychology behind streaming. And it gets into some really dangerous territories, and we see some dangerous things happening, and even in, we could see that stuff happen in the Final Fantasy 14 community in various different ways. Some of it more public than not, but I think that it's when we're talking about interacting in a stream level. I guess I would like to ask you first, Spofie, if you don't mind. Have you had a discussion with yourself and thought about it, about how you come off to people and how that whole mental health dynamic works within your community? I mean, you talk about it some, but go ahead. Sorry.
No, yeah, I'm trying to. So I'm not 100% sure what you mean, I guess.
Okay. So when you were going and you have your stream up and everything, do you think, all right, well, now I'm here and I'm talking to all these people, and what I'm saying may affect these people in some way? Are you worried and concerned about them and how they're thinking? Do you weigh your own thoughts and how your mental health is doing? Have you had those conversations with yourself?
Yeah, no, I definitely think about it, and I think about it in the way I present myself too. It's always been really important to me to be honest with my community with whatever I'm going through, because I don't really like the idea of the whole I don't know, only showing the good side of things sort of feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people have discussed and thrown around the word toxic positivity before, but it's this idea that I really think that you can have a stream focused on creating a comfortable and positive environment while still being honest about things not always being positive, and saying when things are bad and being able to talk about it still, right? You can that's been a huge thing that I've always focused on, and what I guess I've always wanted to reflect of myself is that true reflection of things that people are going through, and not trying to cover that at all, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I've had those conversations with myself as well, and I've tried. So I'll give you kind of my experience. If someone comes into my chat, I assume that if I don't know them, I have no clue who they are. I have no clue the state of their mental health. I have no clue what's going to go on there. So I try to always, when I talk, not be overly offensive. But then again, I have that conversation with myself. Then I'll just be, a plain cracker that just doesn't taste good, doesn't taste like anything, just up there, and it's not even worth going to a stream for. Then you have the opposite side of that, where you could just be super outgoing, crazy, insane, and just pick up everything that you can get. But that messes with your mental health as well, because there's this aspect of I always have to entertain people. I don't know. Ryan, I'm kind of stepping all over my words because I don't know if I can explain it well. I know what you're talking about with the parasocial stuff, but could you explain it a little bit better than I can?
Sure. Well, it's actually interesting the way you both were explaining it. Even if it is stepping on the words, actually it's pretty accurate to what it is, because it's so confusing and it's so hard to know the right answer. But yeah, I mean, parasocial relationships, it's this idea of, you guys make large communities. People see you a lot. I mean, my gosh, Spofie, 7 days a week, that's impressive. And there are some people there that might be with you 7 days a week. And, as that's happening, many are probably starting to feel like they have a personal relationship with you, that they, especially when we're very intimate with our viewers and letting them know our feelings and our past and so on. And, they feel like that relationship is there, and then they want to share it as well, which is in some ways is fine. At other times it might be tough, because they think you're the one to go to say, I'm suicidal, or to reveal some really big trauma in this big public sphere, right? And which we know isn't always great, and it's it can be good in some ways, because you love that there's an outlet, but it's hard to have that balance, right? Because we have something called social penetration theory that has to do with it, or onion theory is what it's called. It's the Shrek. It's Shrek. The idea that you work from the outside in with people, developing trust, starting with conversations like weather, movies, etc. You get to trust them more. Maybe you talk about, your favorite sports team, and then you get closer to the center, and it's politics, and it's these tough things that have happened to you. And then at the core, you have a dozen or so people, right, that you really trust and you would say these intense things with. Well, streamers are kind of put into a position where people feel like the streamer has earned the spot in that space, right? And they're revealing these things in an atmosphere that could be harmful to them, and that it puts streamers in a position of like, I don't know how to address this or do this. And then also the anger that might ensue if, as a streamer, you're not always responding to them, or they feel ignored or whatever. So trying to, the community management piece can be really, really hard. The expectations put on you all, right? It can be incredibly hard.
Oh yeah,
You know?
definitely. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I think that it has gotten better since my stream has gotten, like, I guess over the past few years my stream has grown a bit, and
Mhm.
it has gotten better because I think when you are streaming to, I don't know, let's say 20 people, 10 people, whatever, I think it's a lot easier for people
Sure.
to like develop those very like close parasocial relationships. And I don't know, when I first started streaming, I had some like really crazy situations with people just being like completely, I wouldn't have talked to someone at all, and they were like, I've booked you a flight to come live with me and stream from my like
There you go.
basement. And I'm like,
Oh my
that is
gosh, yeah.
nuts.
There you
Please,
go.
like, I
There you
need a
go.
restraining order sort of thing.
Great
And
example.
it
Yikes.
happens here and there, but it has gotten better. And I do think, like you said, setting boundaries is so important. I mean, like,
Mhm.
knowing what you're gonna do if someone comes to you and says, I'm thinking of committing suicide, like knowing the resources,
Mhm.
having some sort of like education on how to approach that situation is really important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really couldn't agree more. And Gouka, I don't know if you have any 2 cents you want to throw into this. I know you don't stream.
Yeah, I'm not a big streamer. What I will say though, actually, no. It's probably better for a different topic.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, and we are saying this is streaming. Streaming is like has this crazy new, I guess, a field of psychology almost that's going into how that whole interaction works. And there's a lot to study, and it may be new and a little rough too. But I mean, it's not too far off from some of the interactions we have as like guild leaders or free company leaders, as we'd say in Final Fantasy XIV. People who are at like higher standing, where we're always talking and communicating with people, and we're going out there and people depend on you in some way, and you feel like you have to be a certain way because of that. And there are some things that you can kind of relate there. I mean, even when I first start playing this game, I led a static, which is a raid group, Ryan, by the way.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I led a static, and we were getting new members and everything else. And there's this one guy. He was the nicest guy. He was great, but he was not in a great place in his life. He wasn't. And I'm working with everyone in the group, and then suddenly he doesn't show up, and then sometimes he comes up and he does say these things like, I'm going to end my life and everything. I don't know how he is. I'm not talking to him anymore, but it got to the point to where I was calling him on a cell phone, and I was saying, hey, I'm crossing this boundary because I actually have issues with that, by the way, just so you know. I have a past history of people saying things to me that are suicidal, like when I was growing up as a teenager and everything else, and then like getting controlled in some way because of that. Like, that is a factor that people can use to control you. And so I have issues. So when he came to me, he was discussing it. I kind of went a little further than I probably should have. But in the end, he was okay, and eventually he just stopped playing the game. I haven't heard from him since then, but I assume everything is fine. He just needed to be away from the game. Those could be very traumatic experiences, and it happens. When you're dealing with people online, it will happen to you every once in a while, and we're not equipped. None of us are equipped to handle these kind of conversations. I mean, Dr. Kelly, you're a little bit more equipped, but I mean, like most people are not trained to how to interact with people when those situations happen. So I guess I would like to ask this question of you. If you have people kind of coming to you and trusting you in that way, what's a good response for you to make sure that you stay okay and they stay okay? Kelly, I don't know if that's a good question or not.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. That's the point of the streamer mental health kit, is to provide this education to give you exact case scenarios, etc., and how we'd recommend doing it based upon research, what your responsibility is, and knowing what is actually the best way to help them. Because it might feel like sometimes, oh my gosh, I've got to call this person, right? What's your phone number? Getting one of your mods to get their phone. And it's so kind. And I know you all have like such big hearts, and there's some great streamers with these massive hearts out there. and they just bleed for these people who are hurting, and the empathy of you all I know is so high, so it's like, I have to help. But there is a point where that kind of help actually is enabling or makes it more endangered, right? Totally accidentally, right? But I'll tell you, in that example, if someone comes to your stream and is saying something like, I'm so glad you're starting. I'm sure, Spofie, you've come across this, but and probably you too, Frosty. Of I'm so glad the stream has started. This is about all I have anymore, right? Or something where it maybe is alluding to some pretty serious hopelessness, which might suggest this individual might have some suicidality. What we would recommend is maybe a mod whispers to them. Not streamer. Don't address it in the stream, but a mod can whisper and say, "Hey, we noticed this. We just wanted to let you know, of some resource. Are you okay? Is this something where are you?" And you can use this language like, are you safe? Do you feel like you're safe right now? And if they say no, then the extent of your helping, we are so sorry. The community is behind you. We strongly encourage you call these hotlines. If you have that bot in your Discord, you can say, please, and they're working on making it for Twitch as well, but, !depression. It'll give you a lot of resources into what you're feeling, some communities you can get involved with, some places to interact with others to normalize this for you and to get peer and mentor support. Here are some hotlines if you are immediately, endangered yourself. And then that's kind of where it ends. If they continue going on and on, you kind of have just these kind of rote comments, right? Of like, we are not trained to handle that. And we would, we would potentially be harming you if we did. We strongly encourage, and just copy and paste, you know what I mean? And then you'll probably have to deal sometimes with this feeling of, could I have done more? But at that point, that's kind of the best you can do. And then as a streamer, because really with this mental health kit, you wind up teaching your mods actually, right? We sort of say, if you've passed this program, you're kind of competent to deal with this stuff. You know what you're doing. And a lot of it is you guys then instructing your mods of how to handle it. Most of our panels on digital lately, on PAX and stuff, we do a lot of panels, has been like, I'm not your therapist, right? That was one we did with M and some other streamers, or ones where it's specifically like this. But that's incredibly hard. But there are better ways to deal with it. You know what I mean?
There are.
I hope that answered the question.
No, it did. It did. Because, it's something that I feel like I've gotten to a point to where I'm a little bit more confident with handling it. And just to let you know, like, it's also been people who are close to me. Like, I had one of my first girlfriends who kind of used that as a way to control me. Right. And then I had to eventually talk to her mom and distance myself from her completely and cut her out of my life, because I couldn't handle that. I don't have any ability to, and it's harmful to me. And I have also, but I mean, there's other traumas that's happened in my life that have kind of added to all that. And we don't have to get into all of them, but
it's notable.
Yeah. And I think that it's important for us just to realize that we're all humans here in some way or another. And we need to recognize that we can't always be a solution. Even if we want to be like their best friend with it, we have to find the real solutions, and we're not always the real solution. If I had, maybe, I think that's right. A lot of stuff that I'm saying, it's more of my bullshit stuff that I put in my head that I think's right, and I sound confident, but maybe I'm not right because I'm not qualified. So
sounds good to me.
Yeah,
sounds good to me. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
And this would be for you and Spofie. I'm always very conflicted with how open to be when it comes to personal stories or mental health issues or so on as a streamer. When I see people do it, the first thing I feel is admiration for the courage it takes to do so. It's easy for me to imagine for how many people that would normalize that with, right? All these benefits that come with it, but kind of at great benefits with potentially great costs. I start to worry about, are you going to lose a sense of privacy? Are you going to be then endangering yourself because people then believe there's a parasocial intimacy between you and sort of the cost you take? How do you, we sort of know guidelines with research, but experience is so telling as well, wisdom it can offer. In y'all's experience, how do you draw that line of how much to give to your community to not gloss over it and the toxic positivity Spofie was talking about, but also to protect yourselves because your well-being and privacy matters too. How would you define your line?
For me, it's always been I talk about things I'd be comfortable talking to my friends about. And by that, I mean not the things that I tell my friends out of like, those things that you're like, oh, I'm kind of nervous to talk to someone about this. Like, it's kind of like something I don't tell many people. I don't talk about that sort of stuff, but I talk about
Mhm.
the stuff that I would be comfortable, someone that I'm friends with talking about, because I think it's okay to be open about that stuff. I think it's
Mhm.
good to obviously I mean, you need to approach everything with privacy in mind, right? And not giving out identifying information and stuff. But I
Mhm.
think it is okay. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're not really giving any part of yourself, unfortunately, I think it is natural that like sometimes those parasocial relationships form. But if you're not really giving any part of yourself, you're not really being yourself. And at that point, I don't know. That's kind of what streaming as yourself becomes about for a lot of people, is being yourself. So that's just kind of part of it, right?
Sure.
I would like to throw my opinion in here, just
Please.
as a reference. I recently got my bachelor's because I went back to school and everything in cybersecurity. So,
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you.
Fantastic.
It's very vital if you want to talk about it in what's safe is to not even show your face, to not do anything. I mean, and that's just literally it. You have to give nothing to the rest of the world. And when in the realm of streaming that we're familiar with, that's not possible. You kind of accept that as a loss. I mean, celebrities accept that as a loss, right? Lots of people accept this as a loss. I don't know if this is a good example or not, but Rick Moranis was just walking down the sidewalk and he just got punched in the face for walking down the sidewalk. And so he doesn't go around with security or anything. Your information is going to exist, and you have to do your best to protect it. But we do have a reasonable limit to how much we can really protect, and I'm going to be honest, which is one of the reasons I'm not a huge fan. Like, I'm not into like the new wave of things where everyone's using an avatar. What's it called?
VTubers?
Yes, VTubing.
VTubers.
Like, to me, I'm an old man, so it doesn't click with me. I guess I don't know, but at the same time, I love it. It is so secure, and you can stream and be who you want, and you don't have to be self-conscious about anything else. You don't have to worry about anything. You're just there and you're entertaining in a format of a VTuber. And I hope that's where streaming pushes forward to next, because that's what I would like to see, is everyone being safe and happy online. But at the same time, I know it's not always reasonable. There's people who like me that like see that and they're like, okay, maybe it's just not my thing. And they'll go watch somebody else that's with cam. I don't like to do cam when I'm not on stream. I only do cam for MogTalk here. But like, it's one of those things where if you want to be super secure, then be a VTuber. Don't do anything else. But otherwise, you just kind of have to accept some of your personal boundaries are going to be out there, and you're going to slip up and you're going to say stuff. And I'm pretty comfortable, to be honest with you, saying some things, but I do my best not to give too much out there. I want to make it a really hard piece of work, or it's going to be very difficult to get that horrible docs information that they're working to get. So I try to leave it at that, but with the understanding that it's impossible to keep it completely secure. But
That's fair. Thank you for that advice.
yeah, I don't know. I hope that. I mean, you have your name out and everything. I don't have my name out, so you know it's kind of your brand is your name too, though. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, we kind of, it's a weird one with us because we have for academia and everything, our name has their publications, our interviews and panels and things that we do. It's, we can't really escape it. And then there is this kind of odd thing where, our name becomes our brand, and, it's hard to separate that for us, I think. I was actually thinking about the avatar stuff. I'm going to start a series. I do a lot of VR and a lot of VR psychology.
Oh, nice.
I'm going to start a series where I was a neuropsychologist. I did neuropsychology years ago, and I still love it a lot. And in Tilt Brush, I've made these big 3D brains, and I walk in there for therapy and show what's going on in an anxious brain and the pathways, and they can engineer it with these paint brushes. But I've been using this Live compositor that allows you to throw yourself in there. So you're actually in the VR world. And that's what people see, is you actually in the VR world.
Yeah.
And I saw that they had this avatar option. I was like, oh man, that's interesting. Where I'm going to appear as an avatar. And actually, lately, to y'all's points, I've been thinking about like pros and cons. A potential con to Spofie's point is maybe they'll lose some needed intimacy between me and a viewer, right? But then at the same time, I think there is something when you take away the person out of the concept, is maybe a little more easy to focus on the concept. But no, I think it's a very interesting discussion. I can see really big benefits, but I think you're both right.
Yeah.
Having a face at times can be nice.
Yeah. I feel like we could go really deep into that conversation, but there's other things that maybe I want to hit before we go into a huge VTuber show. But Gouka, and again, I'm sorry, we're jumping around a topic that is a little bit less in-game Final Fantasy community stuff. But did you have any 2 cents you want to throw in there, Gouka?
No, I was waiting for the 14 jump.
Yeah, sorry. This is the 14 jump. Sorry. So I wanted to hit that because it was a good point for us to discuss streaming and everything else. But I guess it's to bring that into 14. We're talking about working with other people, and Gouka, you've worked with people on an emotional level. I'm assuming you realize that, right? By being a raid leader, being a guild leader.
People both take it and I give it, or whatever the phrase is. It's definitely a lot of emotional baggage that comes with free companies, especially, we were running for like 5 years. So some people, such as Layla, I've known since 2014, so 6 years, and some people even longer, since 2013. So the thing about an MMO community is that, well, let's take a step back. Being a 14 player is not the same as being a gamer. This was brought up in another stream in regards to WoW, but I also think it's true of 14 because, when you have your other guests coming on here, they're saying, well, we want people to study their jobs and get good at them. And it's kind of like this time investment of very unfun things that are kind of mandated of you by the community. So there is a very communal aspect, and when you're playing this game, you're not just playing it as a one-off, you're playing it as someone who is part of this community. And I remember I was talking with someone named Kyoko Hana, who works as a medical professional, and her take on it is that a lot of drama in 14 community stems from both the prevalence of anxiety and depression, but also this idea of cognitive distortion, which is typically seen alongside those issues. And
so
the idea is,
before you go too much further with the cognitive distortion, I feel like I have an understanding of it, but could you clarify what you mean by that?
Yeah, that's where I was going to go.
Oh, okay.
Next.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. There's different layers to it, but the one layer about it that she wanted to talk about was this idea of black and white thinking. So you're either are something or are not something. And I remember that in this discussion, her example was, I am the best scholar, or I am the best DPS, or something like that. But it can also be very negative. So you could also be like, everyone hates me now, or everyone thinks I'm a bad player. And these are ideas and concepts that definitely feed into 14 very heavily compared to just, standalone games. If I suck at God of War or whatever, no one gives a shit, move on, do whatever. But when it comes to the 14 community, not only do you care, but other people care. There's a reason that FF Logs is this big public thing. It's kind of this idea of, how valued are you on this job? Where do you rank? And it's so granular. 14 had this obsession with the granularity of the best of the best and optimization, to the point where we have things like that. And it can create a lot of tension, because when you have people who are exhibiting some of these issues of depression and cognitive distortion, it's just a recipe for disaster, where people disagree over some very menial thing, and it becomes this larger conflict.
And now, and just to let you know, Dr. Kelly, FFlogs is a site that ranks who has done the highest damage on certain fights.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so it's just basically ranking the players, like this is the best player on this fight because he's done the most damage to the boss and got the fastest clear or something of that nature.
No, I really appreciate that. I'm so curious of what I'll recognize on what. I was so happy. I felt like Captain America. I was like, I understood that reference.
Yeah.
Like I heard the FF logs. I was like, oh, I know that one.
Yeah. If you have any questions at all, just feel free to ask. I'll do my best because, again, to let everyone know, Dr. Ryan Kelly is not like a hardcore Final Fantasy 14 player, but he's a hardcore psychologist, right? And gamer.
Right.
And nerd.
And I do love Final Fantasy. Again, we wrote Psychology of Final Fantasy out of love for it, but I think we're among the, most of us were favorites were either 6, 7, or 10.
Classics.
And a lot of us kind of stopped more or less at 12, but then read a lot about the stories for the role-playing aspect of 14. So no, I appreciate that. I'm hoping to get really educated.
Yeah.
14. I'm hoping to get a seminar course on this today.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. But I mean, to go back to kind of Gouka's point here, I guess there is a kind of divide that's in the world of Final Fantasy 14, where it's kind of to that point, the casuals versus the hardcore players, I suppose. It kind of goes into that as well, where you have these two camps of, oh, I only play for fun, I shouldn't have to have any expectation, and then there's the people who have to do as good as possible. And the discussion is always, how are you affecting other people by your play? Are you doing bad, and so you're causing them more time and stress and everything else? Or you're doing good and helping them? And so there's this whole back and forth about play styles and video games and everything else that's been at conflict for so long in the community of Final Fantasy XIV that it's actually a very interesting discussion, and I think does lead to a lot of divide within the community in its own way. That's pretty much what you were going towards, right, Gouka?
Yeah. And I was really trying to I know I didn't do a good job of it because I'm not as experienced with this. I was really trying to hammer how some of these ideas of cognitive distortion can enhance this type of drama in the community.
Oh, yeah, and the hate between people and everything else. Yeah. Sophie, go ahead.
I will say, I think that there is also a massive middle ground between the person who doesn't raid at all and the person who raids super hardcore. Ranging obviously from people who are interested in raiding but really scared, ranging from people who raid a little bit and they're not sure how to define themselves. And that's where I find a lot of the people who I meet through streaming and who are my FC kind of lies in that weird middle ground where it's almost hard to tackle and help them move along in their journey and enjoy raiding in the game because of some really binary perspectives that exists in the conversation around raiding and some of the terminology that we use.
So
it's
go ahead.
I was just saying, yeah, it's cool to hear you guys talk about it. The best games I was a competitive Marvel vs. Capcom 2 player. It was consistently in the top 50, and then I was a competitive Rocket League player. So not Grand Champ. And, so those are my knowledge. I mean, they're MMO FPS, obviously, but there's some overlapping components with the competitive edge and the idea that to be a part of this community, it's conditional. To be a Fortnite player, a Valorant player, a CSGO player, if you're not good, you're actually not. Some are going to sort of say you're not really a part of the true community, right? We look at a lot of this. Actually, there's a thing we talk about called storming, norming, and performing. And in these competitive-based games that have a rating component or a tournament component, there's this idea, and World of Warcraft too, but where there's expectations. There's sort of this layer at the beginning where people are going to bicker and fight. And dude, why did you do that? Why'd you cast that? Whatever. It's dumb. Why would you whatever?
Exactly. Yeah.
And the idea that's a storming, and the norming is trying to get to the point where if you can develop a communication style where you can be supportive and constructive, get through those differences, have those rivalries, but then come out with some trust. You're going to be the performing group. You're going to be the one who succeeds as a raider, as a team. And Gouka, this kind of goes to you. We've researched actually. Bruning 2015 did a good study on looking at people mainly using WoW, but they did some other MMOs. But looking at leaders of the guilds and studying, how do they affect the well-being, the play style, the communication style of other players? And what they realized is, ones who make their guild members feel valued, trusted, treat them as if they have a sense of mastery or accomplishment, cared for, that those players stay around longer, that positive emotional benefits go outside the game, and actually they do perform better. So a lot of what you guys are talking about, it's stuff we've studied for years in sports psychology. And so actually now there is this very specific type of sports of esports psychology of all of these dynamics that exist.
I mean, that's amazing. I didn't even think about that at all. But yeah, no, when I when I'm thinking about it too, it's Final Fantasy 14 is not. It's competitive, but not competitive, right? It's a game. It's a game that you go and the goal is to beat a boss or do something. And so in these situations where we have the most friction is when people who don't know each other have to interact, when they queue up randomly and have a team randomly, which is a team of a healer, a tank, and 2 DPS, which is like an experts. That's when we see like that interaction where all the hardcore players come in and all the casual players come in. And then in this thing called Party Finder, where you put up a party and you're like, I want to clear this fight, and you have random people come in, and you have to have these forced interactions with people you don't know because you don't have a set group going with you. And so you have all these clashes of people and play styles and attitudes and everything else from the people who are, they're like, play tic-tac-toe, but they draw lines all over the tic-tac-toe board, and they're like, it's just a game, why do we have to care, that meme. And then you have the people who have to be super hardcore and go in as hard as they want to. Then you have everyone in the middle, which is most people. I think is that there's always a kind of gray area that we all live in, just some are a little bit further to one side than the other. I mean, there are people on the edge of drawing lines on tic-tac-toe boards and scribbling all over it. And there are the opposite of people who will say, you didn't heal me there and I died. I'm going to leave the group completely because you're the worst person in the world. And they leave. We've had these experiences. But there's always something behind these players, right? And so what I guess my question comes into now is when we're interacting with people who give us these horrible interactions that we're just not expecting because it makes no sense to us, how do we need to process that for ourselves? And maybe if we have to continue interaction with them, what's the best way to have those discussions and get to their level?
Quick clarifying question?
Sure, yeah.
With the raids, is there a sense of competition in the sense of we've got this big thing we want to achieve and we have high expectations of the other players, and if you don't meet those expectations, we might be pretty frustrated with you?
Well, it's more of like, hey, we're going into a fight and we want to clear it, but you don't clear it because someone messes up a mechanic in the fight, and then you have to start over and go back, and it's just constantly like, how many times do we have to attempt to clear it when everyone should know all the mechanics if it's a clear group that you have made?
And there may be sort of a sense of, I let my team down, or you let the team down.
Yes.
That exists? Okay.
That absolutely does.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I mean, like, and we're also talking about, and this is coming up soon, which is where we get into the really competitive stuff, where people kind of have these perceptions of what the rest of everyone else should be around them. I'm going to be doing a coverage of the World Race that's coming up in the next month or so. And so I'm putting in a spotlight all these people who are really, really good at what they do. And it maybe somehow normalizes for these other players that are going out and they're doing their own stuff. And they're like, oh, well, why can't you clear this? It was cleared yesterday. You should be able to do this. You're stupid. I'm so good. I could have cleared it if I was with someone that wasn't as shitty as you. All right. And so we have these weird interactions with people. And I don't know what my question is. I'm just presenting that as an issue. And maybe your thoughts on that issue in particular, Dr. Kelly.
If I understood it clearly, if I understood it, I hope I got close. is that the question is when you have people who have greater expectations, or their goal is maybe more to achieve than it is to play, I suppose, that as that goes up, how do you manage how that affects the interaction with other players?
Yeah, with the people that are I guess more of like in an MMO world where we're all diverse and we have different thoughts on how playstyle should be and everything else. How do we solve that issue of reducing that friction? Do we just I guess there is no answer. I mean, it really depends person to person, right? And that person could be having something else going behind them. But how can we be responsible players going into an MMO and interacting with people we have no clue who they are? Like,
well, I would say two things. I actually want Gouka, if you could speak to the second thing I want to talk about, because you were personally in this position and you've mentioned it a few times of a few things you did. One is, again, when we do look at video games, and we're looking at problematic gaming. Two things that consistently account for problematic gaming is high competitive games. And competitive can be PvP or PvE, right? So there's expectations. We're playing together, and now I'm frustrated that we didn't beat this boss or something. You know what I mean? Mainly it has to do with expectations. That's one. And then that certain types of loot crates, certain types, not all of them, that's such a general term. But certain ones that get a little closer to gambling, they account for most problematic gaming in youth, right? So the more competitive, the more problematic it's going to be. I work with, I don't work with Riot, but I have some colleagues who work for Riot that I work with. And, it's interesting looking at the dynamics of when you play an unrated versus competitive and how different your experience is going to be. But as a player, when you go in, the biggest thing you have to remember is trying to answer these two questions. When I'm in here, what do I have control over and what do I not, right? Because a lot of the times where we start to tilt, it's because we're subscribing to a myth that I should be able to control this other player who violated my expectation of them. And then I got angry and tilted. Are you did you not and it's like, we know as humans, if that's the way we respond, that player is actually going to perform worse the next time, actually, right? And so we're not effective. We're responding very emotionally. So if we can answer those two questions and then sort of manage the emotional reactivity and like, hey, man, I noticed you didn't heal there. Tell me your thoughts or something like that. I just forgot. I hear you, man. It's so fast paced. What can we do to help you? And that can be effective. But the thing that I want, I'd be so curious, Gouka, is we also know that leaders of raids and leaders of guilds have a lot to do with it because they have the most power, which is similar to the bystander effect. If you got two people, you got someone tilting on someone else, and you have another player, especially the leader of the team, come in and shut that down calmly. It's like, hey, man, we're not tilting here. We're a team, and what can we do to support this player? That sets the tone for the communication style, and that player is less likely to behave toxically or tilt. So Gouka, I wonder if you've had experience where maybe in your community you had some negative interactions or toxic or tilting, and then by you sort of valuing your players and having this leadership quality that you obviously have, you saw it help, or the opposite. I don't know.
So it's pretty interesting that 14 is very different from a game like WoW, where there's a lot of focus on the big guild and the raid leader. In 14, since it's only 8 players, it's pretty easy to, self-destruct the team and then build up again. So there's a lot less emphasis on this idea of leaders and structure. I think back in Heavensward, it was definitely true. But since Heavensward, that model, that mentality has definitely faded away. During my time as leader in Heavensward, I definitely used that that leadership position to kind of temper sentiments. I remember one very specific case in Gordius, where everyone was pissed at Mr. Happy because he was doing like 200-300 DPS less than these other ninjas. And I remember having to repeatedly have these individual conversations with people on his team, like, look, here's the situation. Here's what would happen if you kick him. And logically speaking, you should just like put up with it for now. you guys figure out what you want to do after the tier. But now that you're like slap dab in the middle of it, just kind of like suck it up. I didn't put it that harshly, but that's pretty much the message I gave them. And that worked for like the duration of Gordius. But nowadays in the 8-man group, you can have people that just explode on each other and do not give a shit until certain people come into play. And I say this because I've been 9th man for a lot of the competitive teams since Heavensward. And the 9th man is just someone who like goes over their gameplay and kind of like offers advice and tells them things during the competition. So the way that it's changed since then, it's no longer about the leader per se, it's about the individual person, because each group has certain select people that they respect. And if the person that's giving you shit is not someone you respect, things just go, they fly, they go crazy. But typically my role as 9th man in these groups is kind of offer this role as someone whom they can mutually respect and will agree with, where I say, we need to stop doing this and focus on this.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how the dynamics shifted, but the general idea seems to be there.
I mean, there's still leadership that happens, especially in more like mid-core, I guess, groups that have to stick together. A static, the reason they call it a static is because it's the same static 8 members, and you have one person who's kind of in control and talking to everyone and just organizing, making sure they have some leader role in these 8 people. But it is true that it is less necessary than it was before. I do want to make a quick clarification that Mr. Happy is an awesome person that we all know, and we're just using that one example that Gouka had. And that was like, how long ago was Heavensward?
5 years ago, dude.
5 years ago. That was 5 years ago. But yeah, there's been so many interactions, and maybe we should have brought him on as well to give his discussion, because we've all had the ups and downs of the community in various different ways that have affected our mental health and such. But I did want to go ahead and put out there, while we're using him for an example, I know Mr. Happy pretty well, and he's a really awesome guy. So that 200 or 300 DPS back in Heavensward means nothing relatively to today. I mean, back then, maybe it was a big deal, but it's old situation. That being said, I guess I want to go forward with when we're talking about these interactions with each other, and we're dealing with our expectations, what we can control, what we can't control, and everything else. I do want to say that we will run into situations to where people will come to us and they will be mean and they will be horrible and they will be, going off and everything else. At that point, do we just tell them to calm down? Do we say, that's probably the worst thing to say, but do we just like try to calm them, or do we like have to just be silent for a second and bring ourselves down from all that tension? When we find ourselves in high tension situations in video games, what's the best way to kind of breathe and handle that? Dr. Kelly?
Sure. So in particular, when others, if I'm understanding correctly, when others
are going off, or and it's affecting you. It's going to. We're all human, of course.
Right. So I'll start with what you all know, but I'll add a little spin to it.
Okay.
When we get stressed or angry, essentially it's a stone throw from a fight or flight response, right? Even if it's in a video game. And what's happening in a fight or flight response is, all the raw data that's going to our brain is immediately going to the amygdala. The amygdala lights up, releases a bunch of cortisol. Cortisol sends our heart rate up and stresses out our muscles and activates a few things that, trying to get us ready for fight or flight at a sub level. And if it keeps going, it then talks to something called the locus coeruleus, which then releases noradrenaline. Well, talks to the medulla of the adrenal glands and then releases. All that being said, it's a neurological process, what we feel, and it's instant. Okay, it's instant. So we have to remember that, because otherwise, when that happens, by the way, our prefrontal cortex, the thinking sort of inhibition part of our brain, shuts down, actually, right? So we're literally not thinking, and we're going to be very highly likely to be emotionally reactive. And what I tell people is, you imagine, a threat. Hey, you have a test tomorrow that you totally forgot about, and it's huge. Oh my God, you feel that stress, right? That instant hit, probably noradrenaline when you hear that one.
Yeah.
And then someone says, oh, wait. That's 4 weeks from now. The first thing your brain is going to naturally tell you to do is, oh, God, right? Because taking a deep breath is actually what inhibits your amygdala. That's why we so strongly encourage deep breathing, right? Because it inhibits the release of cortisol. It lowers the activity of the amygdala, and it reactivates the PFC. So if you've, it's childish, but that's the science behind it. And we teach children this since they're little. If you got someone who's tilting and it's starting to make you tilt, or you're getting emotionally reactive, take a deep breath, square breath, 4 seconds in, 4 second pause, 4 seconds out, 4 second pause. Try to relax, and then think about how can I be effective. And the effective way to deal with it is like Spofie said a long time ago is, if I recall, I think it's Spofie. I'm sorry, Spofie, if it was someone else. My memory is not great. Is they obviously are feeling an emotion that they're struggling to control. So if they're going to be in your group, the best thing you can do is try to validate it and try to help them manage it, right? And so like you said, I don't know in the history of humans, telling someone to calm down has actually worked, right?
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, it only makes people. But being like, hey man, like a quick. What we sort of say is you can say, hey man, we're not tilting, but yo, what's going on, dude? You seem real frustrated. So you can quickly throw out the what you're not going to be allowing, right, or what not do, but then almost like it's an aside and be like, but you're obviously frustrated. What's going on? What can we do to help you? Like and hopefully it can work. But again, what do we have control over? What do we not? Sometimes you can't stop them from being emotionally reactive. Some people are more emotionally reactive, and then it's okay, are they going to be able to be on our team?
Well, yeah, especially when you're with random people that you don't know and you have absolutely no idea how they're going to react. They may just leave. And you're just like, well, I guess we just go out and find another person, which is kind of that process. You can only be what you can be, and there's only so much within your control, like you were talking about.
I'll give you one little example you guys might.
Sure.
It's I used to play. We used to have a stream called Parasocial Gamer. I played with a Riot member, and we played Valorant. And with others, I played Rocket League and so on. These competitive games. And we did something where when anyone tilted, we would be positive back to them, right? If they tilted on us, we'd comment on their sense of humor or how quick-witted they were, or whatever, and still be like, hey man, do you want a gun? I noticed you're playing with Ares. Do you want me to buy you the Ares to save you? And we would sort of. She's a psychologist too. So we'd be monitoring the frequency of the negative comments, start introducing a pro-social behavior, and see if they would then begin to model it. And almost across the board, they'd be like, no, it's fine, dude, it's fine. Like, yeah, I'm sorry I tilted, man, it's fine. And it pretty much across the board, if you're responding positively, usually it's going to make it better, even if they're attacking you. But
it's interesting because I almost feel like that makes more sense in a larger group, because you have like kind of a large, like, then it turns into like camaraderie. But in a smaller group, I feel like that could almost be patronizing for someone who is like feeling like, I don't know, I've been in situations before where someone has been tilting, and like I've gone the route of just trying to joke around, and they've seen it as essentially making fun of their feelings in that moment.
Yeah.
So I think it really depends, because like when you're in like in 14 we have Party Finder and we have like statics, and when you're in Party Finder you're dealing with random people who you haven't played with before in a lot of cases, whereas in a static you're playing with the people who you're playing with like every single week. So the way that you're gonna talk to someone who is dealing with like tilting or whatever in a static versus how you handle someone who you're randomly playing with is going to be pretty widely different, I think.
No, you're very right, and there's a thing. It really boils down to mostly how you do it and who you are. For instance, we had another psychologist friend who would play with us, but his natural. I love this guy. He's USC, and he kind of sounds a little bit vulnerable, I guess. Like when he talks, he's like, "Hey guys, this is a good game." Like that kind of sounds like that a bit. Yeah. And so when he would do it, like he could never. They'd be like, "Yeah," like it's just like tilting more on him, and you felt so bad. And we know that if you're a female gamer, you're going to still be tilted on more likely than a male. It's very
Mhm.
unfortunate, but as Spofie, I don't need to tell you, my God, there is a big difference between being a female gamer and a male gamer in respect or the impact you can have on other male players primarily, right? So
Yeah.
absolutely, it's a good point. It's a good point, Spofie.
Actually, that's probably something, I don't know, so if you wanted to go into a little bit about the struggles that you have to deal with.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I mean, it makes sense because, like, I mean, when you talk to, I mean, the way that was just described of how to handle things kind of does make a lot of sense, but it is, I don't know, hard to bro out in the same context, right? Given a similar situation. I mean, I'm a very like if someone is acting in a certain way that I feel like is hurting a larger situation, I'm much more the kind of person to like privately message them and try to talk about it and like have a conversation about it. And usually in the context of someone that I'm close to, it will eventually get to the point where it's like, okay, you probably don't recognize when you're hurting other people in the sense of tilting. So like, let's come up with a way to like notify you in a way that's not going to be like upsetting so that we can like take a step back or you can like go get a snack or whatever. This is a really big tangent, so I'm going to make it as short as possible.
Okay, sure.
But I've grown up with pretty severe misophonia, which is basically when you like hear certain sounds like going into fight or flight. So I have a lot of practice with like dealing with completely irrational, angry responses to people just for like chewing or like cracking their knuckles or whatever, and like just like managing that feeling. So I often kind of like take that context and like try to like talk to people about like a lot of the things that I've learned, like deep breathing and stuff, to like kind of deal with that like really irrational sense of tilt towards someone for just like doing something that's not what you want.
You know,
Right.
I do want to go off on that just a little bit, and I don't know, I've never really thought about it. It was just something that bothered me, is that if I don't, when I get into a random group, a party finder group with people, I refuse to jump in Discord and speak with them on an audio level in any way, because as soon as I hear them coughing or, eating chips or clacking on their keyboard or going crazy, I'm instantly angry. I'm like, how inconsiderate could this person be for not recognizing their noise is going straight into my ear and bothering me? And so since I'm going with random people, I don't want to be that person to control them. And I'm like, no, you know what? We'll see how it goes. If I do horrible, you can kick me out, but I do not want to hear a single thing. I don't want to hear and I don't know, maybe I'm just antisocial at sometimes. Like, I don't even want to hear about, things that are going on in their life. I just want to do the fight, right? It's always like, I just want to stay by myself, have my moment of peace and fight with these other people. And then I don't want any of that auditory stuff, any conversations or anything else. I'm done with it. I just want to kill it. So I don't know if that's related to what you're talking about, Spofie, in any way.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's different levels of like people like struggle with sounds in a lot of way, and I think it's a pretty like not talked about thing with mental health. Is like a lot of people and I think it does tie into like some anxieties as well, and just like when you're thrown into a situation in Party Finder where people are like, get in Discord with these 7 people you don't know, and like we're all not gonna have push to talk on, and like that can be like so overwhelming.
Yeah, it's so much for me. I love talking, by the way. That's why I do this podcast. I love interacting with people and everything else. But when it comes to rating, I just do not want to hear another person unless if I know them in some way or regard.
No, that's fair. I'll add a little bit to kind of validate Spofie a bit. So we sort of look at the response to sensory processing, and when someone has a sensory processing disorder, there is a spectrum. To your point, Frosty, right? You sort of have, how much am I bothered by sight, sound, tactile, shirt tags, texture of food, etc. And some people get annoyed by it, and then others have more of a stress response because of it, right? It's more that amygdala thing I just talked about. It's not panic, but it could lead to it, where it's like an instant cortisol, noradrenaline for something like chewing or smacking or something. And misophonia is a specific type of a sensory processing disorder. A little funny story. I have a colleague of mine, she's co-founder of Geeks Like Us. We work a lot with Wizards of the Coast and do a lot of D&D therapy and things like that. A lot of D&D tabletop. And she has a great series called Psychology at the Table, where she covers basically GM tips of how do you have someone with ADHD or who's dating someone or anxiety. And she did one on misophonia with Elisa Teague. Elisa Teague is a big member in the D&D community and who has misophonia, and I was going to be a part of it. But I have, oh, cool, Nemec. And I have a thing that is probably partly physical. I had surgery, but it still exists. And it could be a motor tic, but where I make these sounds often, or I do that with my mouth, or I kind of blow out with my nose. And, there's some physical part of it. But we sort of agree. So you might see me muting and unmuting if I'm out to clear my throat and
That's
stuff.
fine.
It's we were like, yeah, I probably shouldn't be on that interview with Elisa D. It's like, because it's, as much as I can't really control it, and I shouldn't be shamed for that. At the same time, it's like, well, I don't need to be there. She's gonna drive. She's gonna like Spofie. It's like, no, I might make her have a stress response if I keep making these sounds.
Well, let us know, Spofie, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh god.
But no, Gouka, I know we've been talking a lot, and I haven't really directed a lot towards you. I don't know if you want to take a second to throw your 2 cents in. I did hear your mic light up, or see your mic light up. I just started talking as soon as I saw it.
So it kind of, the direction we're going is something that has made me not resentful, but kind of lament the direction of mental health awareness.
Yeah.
Which in itself is kind of broad statement. It's that a lot of mental health discussions center around depression and anxiety, but there's obviously a lot more to it than that. There's, you've got your schizophrenia, you've got autism, you have OCD. There's a lot of different things, but every time that it comes up in the gaming community, it's usually just people talking about things that have made them sad or their anxiety. And this is kind of where I've been thinking that it's there's kind of this block where you have certain things that are very communally understood. People generally understand sadness, which they associate with the depression. They understand anxiety, which obviously associate with anxiety. But these other things do exist, and they are going to be part of the gaming community because it is an MMO, but they are not discussed or thought of as acceptable things. They're not as readily accepted as like mainstream mental health issues, I guess. And it kind of reminded me of this article. I think I sent this to Frosty that was talking about Kanye West, where he talked about suffering from bipolar disorder, and most of the talk around that has been anger and kind of laughing at him about it because they're upset with what he's done in the political scene, which I can understand, obviously makes sense. But at the same time, how do you balance trying to be accepting of these mental health issues versus the consequences that they cause? And how can you make this discussion of mental health be more inclusive of things than just anxiety and depression?
Yeah, and Dr. Kelly, would you like to jump in on that?
Sure. Well, so, the things you're going to pop up, and it's just in general how we develop schemas and ideas of how things. The more common something, the more it'll pop up. 50% of people at one point in their life will deal with clinical anxiety and or depression. So you're going to see it more. So the discussion is going to be there more, right? It's quote unquote more normal. Normal not meaning healthy or unhealthy, just common, right? Just typical. And so that discussion will occur more. Whereas if you have something like bipolar or schizophrenia, it's about 1%. Magnitude is higher, right? A lot more invasive in people's life, both of those. And then you sort of ask, well, then also how going to manifest in a MMO world, right? Are we going to see someone with schizophrenia, are we going to see their positive and negative symptoms? How much is that going to impact the game? And so there can be these very natural barriers, aren't necessarily people being neglectful, more of it just, it doesn't pop up. Now you have groups like Geeks Like Us, Take This, Guardians of Mental Health, Geek Therapeutics, GamerDoc, Anxiety, all these people who their work crosses mental health and gaming. And we're doing our damnedest, right, to make this relevant with Twitch streaming panels. I mean, we did over 16 panels last year at comic and gaming conventions, and at each panel, or over conventions, and then at each convention, we're doing over 6, 7, 8 panels and working with the gaming industry, meeting with Microsoft, and trying to boost this. Articles, interviews. We're really trying our best. But yeah, you're right. It is hard, especially with these limited ones. Now, I think what we're trying to do now is say, all right, we're struggling to. Yeah, I see Miss Rogue. Anxiety is great.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it's what we're trying to do now is disseminate the resource to have access to this information to as many Discord channels. Hence the bot that Guardians of Mental Health, Gouka. It's like the idea you could ! Schizophrenia. Great explanation how it's going to appear in gaming, resources for treatment, ways it might pop up. We do videos on kind of here's how Asperger's is going to appear in your Discord. Here's going to appear in the video game. Here's how it's going to appear at a D&D table. And so these resources exist. I think our big barrier is getting big people who have bigger communities than ours of this very niche gaming psychology community to disseminate it, right? And that is a big part of what we're doing. Gouka is trying to do that. So if any of you guys or anybody is wanting to know, where can I get resources to disseminate? Oh my God, I'd love to give them to you because that's our goal too.
So I will definitely be reaching out to you after the show about that too, because I feel like this is something I've been thinking about a lot, a whole lot, especially within the Final Fantasy XIV community. And that is not because the Final Fantasy XIV community should be correlated, mental health issues, right? It's more of, hey, mental health issues should be correlated with our life and things that we interact with. Final Fantasy XIV just seems to be part of my life, and so that's what it's where I'm actually aware of it at. But I see it all the time, where people are just having these kind of issues and they're ignored. Not ignored, but people don't understand it, and they just they don't know how to deal with it, and it's better just to kind of push them off to the side. Right, and not deal with it in a way that's I guess would be proper. And I guess that is, I'm going to ask another question of it's just going to be me asking questions of Dr. Kelly all night. So I do want to take a second to ask Spofie if you wanted to put in your 2 cents to anything that we talked about recently.
I think I kind of got my 2 cents in with that part. I mean, I completely agree that I don't know if there is I don't think that there should be a stigma in mental health or correlating it with anything. I mean, I think it's really good to be talking about it with regards to anything. And I mean, video games, it's obviously something that comes to the forefront because there's all sorts of different reasons to talk about it with regards to video games. I do like how Gouka talked about the anxiety and depression thing being kind of the only things that we really talk about, because I think that even when I was talking about my own sensory processing stuff, I kind of felt the need to relate it to anxiety, because a lot of people really understand anxiety and understand depression, and people who struggle with other things feel the need to almost validate them by relating them back in some way to those more understandable difficulties for people, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I think, again, me bullshitting whatever my thoughts are, I do think that it is important for us to kind of try to find that correlation. I mean, it sucks to have to simplify conditions and stuff, but how else do you reach out to people besides trying to take things that they know and relate it in some way? Because they're not experiencing it. They don't have that same experience that you have. And maybe that's not right. Maybe you should go in more detail. Kelly, Dr. Kelly?
No, look, guys, I might have a PhD, but these things that you're saying is bullshitting are pretty damn accurate. So, don't sell yourself short here. I just have some names and years to provide with it. But yeah, I mean, excuse me, sorry. Passive neglect still feels the same by the neglected as active neglect, right? Intense, whether it be the intentions there or not. And, take misophonia. Is it what's misophonia? Oh, well, it's a hypervigilant response, amygdalic response. Oh, what's that? Well, it's a stress response, which is different from anxiety and worry. Oh, what's that? Well, it's a type of sensory processing. What's that? Well, sensory processing falls under the branch of an anxiety disorder. It would be a mess. But to your point is what do you ultimately want? Do you want them to know, to be able to write a paper on the thing, or do you want them to understand you a bit better, or understand the person a bit better. And then what you hope for is that they'll want more information, and you can give a little bit more, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you gotta Spofie, Frosty, Gouka, you're all correct. You got to start on a common ground. You're gonna over their head, or they're not going to get it or relate to it.
Yeah.
It's really, for me, it's so encouraging seeing more people talking, and I'm hoping that, like, as people talk more about anything within the mental health sphere, people dealing with all sorts of stuff feel more comfortable like bringing forward and talking about it. Because I don't know if y'all know Meow. He's talked about like his struggles playing the game, one-handed, things like that that really really relate back to accessibility, and people in general understanding how accessibility could affect a rating, for example, coming back to it, whether it is accessibility in that sense, learning disorder stuff, talking about like color blindness issues with rating, and all that stuff like comes back to relate to like people feeling more comfortable like bringing up that stuff and like talking about how different things that might not be affecting one person is affecting them.
No.
You guys are making me think we need to start a series on psychology.
Maybe.
The psychology of the table's been very nice, but maybe we do hit video games specifically for that. Maybe that'll help. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, like, Final Fantasy XIV is kind of, it's weird. It's a niche community in a way. It's a big MMO. I think it's probably the second biggest MMO that's really known in the world in a way. I don't know if there's other MMOs that really, come into comparison with it. Maybe I'm just being too braggy about it. But there are a lot of people with a lot of different personalities in lots of different environments in the world. And it's funny, our perspectives change. And there's so many things that change our perspective. And just being in England, for example, your perspective is completely different. You could have the same qualities of everyone else, but you have a different perspective, a different cultural learning, and everything else that comes up. And so we interact with a lot of different people. And we just have to, and that's something I've been kind of telling myself recently too, is that we always have to keep that in mind, that the people that we interact with they're going to have their own perspective, and they may not realize a lot of their thoughts are dependent on their perspective. And so it's which I could bring this back to political stuff, but I won't. I feel like we've sailed that enough. But I guess I do want to bring this back because, Gouka, you did bring up kind of the uncommon versus common discussion here, and make sure that we actually ran at the course that you wanted, or if there was something else that you had that you want to follow up with on it.
I mean, I wouldn't follow up on like the same topic. Well, when you were talking about the niche community, something really hit my mind that's been kind of on my mind here. So one of the things about the 14 community is, I don't want to call it sheepish, but there's definitely like trends towards big personalities, especially because a lot of it has coalesced on social media.
Yeah.
And I would definitely want to put out a big caution against that, because I went through some stuff myself back in like 2015, 16, even going into today. And it was kind of interesting when I talked with people about my own issues, how things didn't correlate with the personalities that you see. So, the people that you would think would be most accepting or open to these discussions are the people who are discussing it on social media. In an ironic twist, sometimes it was the most toxic personalities that actually had my back on these issues. It was kind of mind-blowing, and it was kind of something that really threw me for a loop and fucked with me for the longest time, way back in like 2016, because I was just sitting there thinking like, holy shit, all of these people I thought were this way are actually this way. And in the topic of mental health, there's always this power dynamic between people who are suffering it versus not. And it's especially tough when the people you're dealing with are big personalities. So for example, I won't drop names here, but there was a big streamer and world progression rater during Midas and Creator that broke up with his girlfriend because she told him, "Do not message me before prog." This like goes back to like strategies for prog. So that was the thing. She messaged him, and he broke up with her, and went on to talk about her mental health issues in all of these discords and different groups, to the point where she actually attempted suicide that year. And I remember this because her cousin messaged me in game, really pissed with me, thinking that I was somehow related to this, but because she was just throwing out names of people from the game. And so, um, when you look at this person on the surface of it, they're talking about mental health. They're talking about very liberal agendas. It's all very good. But I would very much caution people to, challenge what you see on the social media front, because that is a big part of how people view each other in this game. And so something I just wanted to discuss is think about this power dynamic and be aware of it whenever you're hearing things from people, because I may not expect you to be bold enough to like bite back on people who do this, but if you conform to it, then you're doing even more damage than you probably want to be.
Dr. Kelly, would you like to comment on that?
Fair point.
Okay, yeah. Fair. It is difficult. And I think if I'm on the same level here with you, is that we talk about it, and there's personalities that will say, yeah, I'm here for you, we're all supporting, we're loving and everything, and that does get into that parasocial discussion that we're having, right, in a way. But at the same time, the people may not be prepared to deal with that. And it's hard to have that communication because they may have not seen this show and heard our advice and everything else about how to handle these different things. And so you have these kind of conflicts going on where people should say, hey, this is what I'm supporting. I'm just trying to make you aware. I am not a specialist and I can't help you. That's not the surface level that probably should be there. Is that what you mean, Gouka?
A little. Well,
correct me completely. I'm fine being wrong.
Yeah, I wouldn't really like talk about it about how much I could help you, but I guess it's about exercising skepticism and just being more aware of things going on, I guess.
Like us as viewers us as like streamers be aware of what we're putting out there, and viewers being aware of what they are, the realistic expectations should be between them and and big personalities.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously the streamer has that responsibility, but ultimately, you can't expect streamers to be perfect. So you as the viewer, it was mostly my target audience, if that is,
okay.
Don't idolize people is kind of the takeaway, Absolutely. Even though that's something that happens a lot in this community.
And it's hard. And, we will constantly tell people, and we'll try to make that the norm, but there's more people being born every day, and there's more people coming in with that blank slate that run into these issues. And people are streaming, and they are interacting with social media younger and younger, and just getting all that information into their heads kind of difficult. But no, I 100% agree with your point. I guess this does come into another part of all of this, is that, like, when we're talking about supporting and being positive towards a positive mental health atmosphere and everything else, what are the expectations we should have on ourselves to how to achieve that without going too far past it to where we're dedicating our life and every second to making sure everyone is mentally healthy that we interact with? And I guess that's my question to you, Dr. Kelly.
I wonder if I'm still blown away 7 days a week. Oh my goodness, Spofie, I wonder if you have thoughts on that, actually.
In terms of, sorry, could you repeat the question real quick?
Absolutely. So, I mean, what are our realistic, like, when we're going out there and we say things like, because right now we're doing this show to talk about mental health and try to make people more aware and have these conversations and everything else. Where do we set our limits with that advice, and how do we present this to where, like, hey, this is mental health. What are we trying to achieve? Are we just trying to make people aware, or are we actually trying to help people? Like, what? And that's kind of a weird question. We're helping them by being aware, but if you get what I mean.
I think it's going to change from person to person. I generally don't think the average person should be giving like advice necessarily. I mean, depends on the context of it. I mean, if it's just in the context of, you're talking to someone who's like a friend or like in your community and just giving like life advice, that's one thing. Giving like specific mental health advice is kind of another. I more lean towards just wanting to create a place and have people feel more comfortable just like talking about their own truth in general and feeling heard and like feeling validated. Because I think it kind of goes back to the beginning and like, I mean, even when we were talking about the political stuff, just like reflective listening, like some people really just need someone to be able to listen or like need a place to be able to vent or whatever, where it's not, their normal social circle of people,
Yeah. I mean, the stranger on the bus thing is actually very helpful, and I think that's what a lot of therapy comes into almost. And I'll be clear for everyone. I haven't really told anyone this, but like over the summer, I'm in therapy right now. I do therapy, and I started over the summer because I was going through a lot of stuff that people may belittle in their own way and everything else, but I've had that discussion, and I talk to people. It's not, my therapy is not as active as it was, but I was at a pretty bad point, and I don't make that as public to everyone, but I think it's important maybe for me to say that too, to let you guys know it's normal. Therapy is pretty normal, and it is a privilege of me to be able to afford it and kind of go through those motions, but actually therapy is fairly accessible right now due to the pandemic, funny enough, and if you have any kind of health insurance. But then again, you might not have health insurance, and so there's resources out there. I'm privileged in the way that I can actually go to a therapist and attend that every single time, but it's not something that people should say and feel bad about. I don't feel bad about it, and I think that's something that I would like to see more within the community. And I know we joke about it. We're like, man, yeah, I need therapy. Like, oh yeah, like that's kind of a joke. But I mean, it's not a bad thing. And I feel like we should normalize that with everyone else and say, hey, yeah, it's not a bad idea. Go talk to somebody that you don't know personally and can discuss these things with you. And I've managed a lot of grief I've had recently because of it. And I'm happier now than I would have been if I didn't do it. So, Dr. Kelly, go ahead.
Thank you for saying that. That can be a tough thing to say.
It can be.
I see some people appreciating it in your chat there.
Well, yeah.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a testament. A lot of therapists have therapists. And I think one of the things I say when I come in, I get them to explain what mental health is to me and what psychology is to me, and I think the idea is, well, therapy is when you go get fixed, or when you're having like depression, you go get fixed. That's only half of it. The other half, positive psychology of like, look, you're not having mental health issues, but how can you improve your life, right? How can you, the question of less of, how do we fix what's broken, but how do we use what works, right? I mean, those are, we forget about that latter question. And because we so are deficit focused on the first one, I think it is sort of stigmatized, like you had said. Well, actually, I have another question related to your previous.
Sure.
Before I do that, I want to make, in case Gouka had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with that. What's the next step part, or how do you like live with it? Because a lot of times, I remember reading like way back, a while back, there was someone that was saying. I think he was talking about relationships. He was like saying, don't get into a relationship until you fix your mental health issues. And the general idea that a lot of players have about mental health is that it's something that you go to a therapist and then you fix it. You get your medication, you solve it. It's like the cold, where it's just you get it, then you take your medicine, you fix it. But sometimes people are going to have to live with this for the rest of their lives. And because they have to live with it for the rest of their lives, what's really important is making sure it's not debilitating. It's something that, it doesn't render you less functional than you want to be, basically. And that's why sometimes the whole like resource dropping can come off as a bit cold. I say this from my experience, like years ago. I remember in 2016, I was actually in the hospital for attempted suicide. And leading up to that, I remember talking with a bunch of people, and the ones that were really good were the ones that would sit there and have that talk with me. And um, it wasn't it wasn't a feeling of I'm trying to fix this. It was like, why are you feeling this way? What's going on? And just kind of like broing out, so to say.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the ones that were really almost felt offensive was like, here's this number, go call it, or something like that. Or even in the case of someone just immediately calling the police, and it's kind of like, I'm trying to have dialogue about this this topic, not just get pulled in by the police or something. So yeah, that's why I think it's also important to recognize that these aren't issues that you go out and fix per se. You just make them less intrusive.
And I appreciate you saying that. I assume the people you were speaking with were people who are close to you, that you felt you had intimacy with. I assume if it was that. Yeah, that would be a pretty awful. Someone that you think you're very close to is like, oh, you're like, you're my best friend. That's pretty messed up right there.
Yeah. I mean, I will, if I can cut in just for a second here, I will say that it is, that there is kind of a situation to where we are in those dire moments where we feel like we need help and everything else, and it doesn't feel good if someone doesn't give us the response we're hoping for, especially when we're in those moments. But a lot of people, even if they seem confident and able to kind of discuss that stuff, it may be difficult to kind of, I guess, expect them much out of them, because again, they're just a person, right? They don't have these discussions on a regular basis, and they may not be able to handle it. When they talk to you, they may freeze up, because what else do they know to do? I don't know if that may be something that you think about at all, Gouka, but I'd like to hear what you think on that too, because it does suck that someone you're like, I need help, and then they're just like, call this person, do this, and really what you just need is someone to talk to. Do you have any recommendations for how someone should respond to you in those cases if they maybe don't have the ability, or they actually feel like they're going to freeze up?
Well, that's the thing. I like I said, I'm not a qualified medical professional, but in my experience, the way that what I wanted at that time was just to have that talk. But I can also see where in some cases it might be more urgent. So, I've also been on the receiving end of this. Like I said, with that person earlier, when I heard about what happened from her cousin, it didn't actually end right there. There was another attempt where I ended up staying on the phone with her for about 7 hours or so through the night, just trying to keep things, keep things from going bad. And I guess this is probably where a bit of that empathy comes into place, is, trying to figure out what their goal is in coming to you. Because if they're coming to you with something, they probably have something in mind, unless it's literally just like, hey, I'm doing this by, that's the kind of urgent case. But if they are coming to you otherwise, then do your best to figure out what are they looking for in this, and try to deliver on that.
Yeah, I found that I think that when it comes to like resource dropping, for example, it's something I've very much done in situations where someone who is a viewer of my stream messages me about suicidal ideation and stuff, and it's not really someone I've ever talked to before, and I don't feel comfortable like talking to them about it, right? Because I don't even really know who they are. So then that is like the natural response. But I think that there have also been situations where someone that I know and care about has come to me with like suicidal ideation, and at the time I didn't, like, whether it's freezing up or just finding like knowing, like already getting like triggered by the conversation. Like I have like, and I'm not saying that this is like the right way to handle it or something, but it's always been like the only way that I've known to handle it is just to like really like talk about like what value that person has had in my life and like tell them what they mean to me, and then just that's all I ever really feel like I can do, because past that, like if it's someone that I care about, like if I'm like in a situation where I feel like I'm then gonna like start freaking out, I'm like, I care about you, and then like,
Mm-hmm. So, and it's such a difficult discussion to have, by the way, for a lot of people. I have, again, I've had lots of past experiences where I've had discussions with people, and one of my friend's sisters, she actually went through the issue of someone actually did commit suicide in front of her. And it was one of those things like, oh, well, I loved you, you didn't love me back, so this is what's happening. And it's horrible. I mean, and when you hear these stories and these things kind of get close to you, it makes you extra sensitive to these situations. And for me, at least in my personal experience, I'm sure she went through a lot with hers, but just even knowing, these things do happen, and they're happening close to you. I guess it's the same thing with the coronavirus. If you have people dying from it around you, you're like, oh, well, this is something serious. And if it's not even around you at all, or someone just coughs a little bit, then it's not a big deal. But when this stuff happens, you start to kind of freak out a little bit, and it sucks, because even if the people care about you and they do want to help you, they just don't know what to do. And it's such a sad situation, and it feels disheartening, because it may feel like they don't care about you, but I feel like also there's a situation to where they just don't know how to handle it. But I don't know if that helps at all. And Gouka, we did have our own conversations, but I mean, I don't know if I was a horrible person during those conversations or not, because I understand, and I didn't want you to have to bring up that stuff if you didn't want to, but I do understand. And
oh yeah, it's perfectly fine. It's one of those things that's kind of been put out there, so it always feels awkward to talk about. It's not something that's enjoyable, but I also very strongly, just based on the things I've been through as a child, believe in just truth of the matter. And so, these are facts that I'm talking about. So I have no problem saying them, even if they are uncomfortable, just because, they are facts.
And Dr. Kelly, I don't know if you want to jump in at all. And also, if you have to go soon, just let me know.
No, that's okay. My children came home and they stormed in.
Oh, it's okay.
Put us in VR. And then the dog came in. I was like,
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think those were all really good points. It's so idiosyncratic. For some people, I mean, we all have different needs when we're going through a hard time. Some people really want emotional coping. They don't want solutions. Solutions feels invalidating or belittling. They just want to be heard for a while. They don't really want to solve it in that moment. I just want to talk about it with somebody who I care about and who knows. And other people, like I'm more in the problem solving route, right? That doesn't do me any benefit personally. If I'm going through a hard time, I want to talk with somebody about solutions. And this reminds me of my wife is an emotional coper, and I'm a problem solving coper. And we tend to want to provide people. Hang on.
There's no problem at all. I completely get it. And I would also say I'm kind of in that situation too. Like if I ever get in an argument with my wife, I'm aggressive and I want to solve it and I want to fix it. I just don't want a bad feeling anymore.
I do the same thing.
Yeah, I'm so.
Right.
But she's
It's
like,
hard,
no, I just don't want to talk to you. It has to be time. And it's hard for me because I keep like. I get more angry and more angry just because I'm like, I want to solve it, but there's other ways to handle it, and I just am on a different spectrum.
Right. Yeah. It's and we've done a lot of research. When my wife, when I'm going through a hard time, I've told her, please don't. Like, oh, that's so hard, because that would work for a lot of people. It does the opposite. It makes me feel vulnerable. I go the other direction. Like I don't want to, right? Like it's like I need it. Can you come up with some solutions? And it makes me uncomfortable. And then with hers, we joke that it's we just call it. I just want you to call Karen a bitch, right? And so like she's an orthopedist and she'll be talking about frustrating. And I'm kind of sitting there like thinking social dynamics. I'm like, okay, and you went to the HR, okay? Did you feel validated by the HR? No, okay. And have you tried this? And she's like, will you stop trying to solve the problem for a second? So I think, to these points is some people, they do not want emotional coping, and that is the last thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they want problem solving. Other people, they want a distraction, avoidant coping. Other people, like Gouka, which is totally reasonable. It's like, I just want emotional coping. I want to be heard, and I want to have someone with me in this moment, in this feeling, so I don't feel alone. And I can just process this in a safe space. And it's so idiosyncratic. And so, the best thing you can do, no one's going to be offended by reflective listening. Mm-hmm. If they say something to you and you summarize it back, okay, so it sounds like it was a really hard day, and this person did something that made you feel very frustrated because, it's just like not at all what you're thinking. Or, just summarizing, so you're saying, I understand what you're saying. No one's going to be offended by that. Mm-hmm. Right. And then maybe the follow-up question, instead of assuming they're an emotional coper or a problem-solving coper or an avoidant coper, or what they're needing is like, what do you need now? Right? Like, what would make this better? What do you need now? Mm-hmm. And if they're struggling to tell you, maybe you can try to, find. But again, by the way, this is just individuals. It's not if you're a streamer.
Right. Streamer. Clarify, right? Yeah. Because you can't do this for every single person. Yeah. Yeah.
No, you don't have any part. This is the drop the resource, right? Sort of, we hear you, get the mod to whisper. It seems like you're having a really hard time. Are you safe? And then I was like, we are so sorry. We're a community with you, behind you. Here are some resources you can do, whatever. And then you have to kind of back off. Because something I would say is, even when you have a personal relationship, you have to remember yourself. And you have to remember, are you putting on 1,000 hats? Right? Are you putting on a therapist hat for them? And then are you putting on a friend hat? And then are you putting on a colleague hat? Like, how many hats are you wearing? And how is it affecting you? If you have a friend, and we've all done it, kind of big-hearted people, and Gouka, I'm so glad your friend had you for that long conversation. And I'm not speaking to that conversation, but I'll use a hypothetical of, if you have someone speak to their friend through the night, right? What might have happened inadvertently is, they now are not going to see a therapist because they have you. And they believe that the precedent is, I can go talk to my friend for 12 hours when I need them. So I'm not going to pursue a mental health practitioner, right? I'm not going to seek a resource, right? Which could go south and could affect a relationship. You've been up all night talking. I sort of think of me as a psychologist. If I talk to my friend all night, well, the next day I'm going to be sleep deprived. I'm going to be a worse husband, a worse psychologist, a worse dad. My well-being is going to be low. I'm going to have an increase of melatonin all day, so I'm going to have a decrease in serotonin, so I'm going to be depressed. I might not exercise because it's going to, now we just jeopardized our self-care to take care of someone who really did need to also seek other resources. No. So it's hard, and there's no clear line. We try to provide boundaries and try to provide guidelines, but to everyone's point in here that has been said, there's no easy way to do it. It's so idiosyncratic,
yeah. Gouka, I don't know if you want to put any thoughts more into that, or if you're good on that.
Let me get a moment to think.
That's okay. I do have a situation I do want to relate to what you just said, and it's not a one for one. It's completely different. But over the last in April, I lost like a long time animal of mine, which led me to a lot of grief and everything else. And after that, I went and I was driving down the road, and I guess I was just getting to that point to where I was kind of accepting the situation and dealing with it a little bit better. And I was on the interstate during rush hour, and there was a dog on the side of the interstate that was sitting there on the concrete, and I'm like, okay, this dog's in trouble. I got to help them. But then I took a second. I was like, all right, if I stop, I'm going on the side of the interstate, and I could get hit by a car. I could scare the dog into the interstate and then cause even more issues for myself. I'm not equipped to handle this situation. And so I kept driving. As hard as that was very, very difficult for me. But as hard as that was, I kept driving, and then I contacted animal control, and they had to handle it from there because there's nothing else that I could do without putting.
A really good analogy.
Yeah, because there's so many other factors that I have to take in that could have hurt other people. Like if I get hit by a car, my wife is dealing with that now. The other animals in my house are dealing with that now. Everyone else is deal with that now. And they would have to deal with it as well. As if I feel like I caused a worse situation and made that reaction happen, then that's going to affect me, which hits everyone else. And so I knew it was important to kind of just be responsible and do what I thought was gonna lead to the best thing. Even though I have this weird hero complex where I want to save that dog, I know I can't.
I'm going to use that analogy from now on. I'm going to pretend it was.
Okay, that's fine. You can. It was just an experience I had that it stuck with me pretty well. Gouka, I don't know if you want more time, I can give you more time too.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about, like I said, that's why I've been very careful to preface it with, this was my experience, because I actually don't know how common this is for other people wanting that type of resolution, or what they're expecting, because the long term like draw out of that whole situation, it was pretty interesting. And this is kind of a tangent, but basically part of it stemmed from people talking about using suicide as a bargaining chip down the line. This goes back to what you were talking about earlier, Frosty. So, when I talked about this, some people took that as a signal of like, yeah, he's just saying that because he wants me to do X, Y, Z. And it was kind of weird because
invalidating
people,
too.
not just invalidating, but like I remember it would be over stuff that happens in council. So you're talking about in-game stuff, and it's kind of like, why would I throw myself or do that over something that's in-game? That's very petty and trivial. And the other part of it that actually really hurt was, how do you prove that you're not lying? And it almost feels as if you have to just go through with it in order to prove that you're not lying. And so it was pretty interesting because I went to therapy, I tried medication, none of that worked. And then this year, I wrote about it publicly. 0 days without Final Fantasy drama, right?
Right.
Basically, I wrote about it pretty in depth about the things I had been put through. And since then, it's just been great. It's kind of weird. It's like the therapy wasn't the silver bullet, medication wasn't the silver bullet, but just actually being upset about it visibly. It's been a huge change in my life just from like talking about it. And it, this didn't like happen like overnight. It's been 4 years of thinking about different things. And I guess one of the things that really pushed me to that point was there's this, she used to be like the chief editor for The Verge, Sarah Zhang. And she recently changed jobs, I think, to the New York Times. And people were bringing up some of her tweets because she made tweets that were like offensive to white people, white males specifically. And one of the lines in there was talking about how it was a piece in support of what she did. And they were saying that she's entitled to her anger. And so I guess this kind of goes back to the boundaries thing where, therapy and medication are one thing, but sometimes I just feel that you do need to just speak the truth and be angry and say what comes to mind, because that was at least the solution for me. And I know this is anecdotal and can't really speak to everyone, but that was a huge thing for me.
I feel like that's actually really important to hit on, is that when we talk about solving some of the issues that we've had in the past, or other people and how they solve them, it's not the same for everyone. It's probably really important that was a solution with Gouka, but my solution, if I was in that situation, could be different. And same thing with Spofie, could be in a situation where that's different. We're not all going to respond and be able to handle the things the same way. So you gotta. It's tough. It's a really tough road, but I think you got to find the right solution for you. And Gouka eventually did, and he tried the typical things that people would expect you to do, but he found the right solution in the end. It's a tough road sometimes.
I get that too. I mean, I think one of the hardest things when you're going through stuff that you're struggling with too is like when you're questioning your own reality of what you're angry about in some cases. Like you might even think like, like, or someone's trying to like devalue like what you're angry about, or like say that you shouldn't be in some way, like that can like stick with you. And sometimes you like internalize it in a way that like when you finally are able to like talk about it and get it out there and realize that you are allowed to like own that and own what upset you, it can help a lot.
Hmm. Dr. Kelly, do you have any bits you want to throw in there?
No, I mean, it's a good point. I think with any practitioner, psychiatric, psychological, or therapist, we have to abide by best practices, right? And best practice would refer to what are evidence-based ways of helping. And let's take mild to moderate depression, anxiety, since it popped up a bit. The number one treatment's therapy. It's better than medicine. Severe anxiety and depression, you have to have medicine, right? Acutely suicidal, I mean, these type of things, if you're not doing it, you're going against best practice, right? Might they be okay? Sure. But if you're not doing it, you're going against, you're not increasing the likelihood that they'll survive. But the reality is, like Gouka saying, it's so individualized. I know some people who, take acai berry. There's no research on acai berry curing, depression, right? I mean, there's no neurology. But look, if the placebo effect of acai berry is going to do her, fantastic, right? I mean, like if I got someone taking CBD oil for their arthritis and they're like, it's helping, I'm like, that's really great to hear. Like, I'm like,
right.
roll, right? And then there are some things that are hard to study. I mean, we've studied about how self-disclosure, when it can be good, when it can be bad, kind of what Gouka's talking about of getting a story. And, with things that involve trauma, certainly saying your narrative and having that narrative accepted is important. It can be great for some people. Others, if a part of their struggles has to do with, needing acceptance from meaningful people, and then they're getting acceptance from strangers. Well, we know that can be like a filling the void, and then they start to have problematic social media use because they're starting to fill their void of I'm not being accepted IRL, and now I'm filling my void with likes and retweets and followers, but it's like an artificial acceptance that doesn't maintain. And then we actually see it might help at the beginning, and then later mental health issues are larger. So with all this stuff, there's a reason that we have so many professionals. It's so idiosyncratic. I mean, it's so individualized. I love that work for Gouka, and I know there's a number of people who it would, right? And then there's some that'd be the exact opposite. So it's figuring out. The therapist's role is supposed to be able to help. I'm sorry that's not a role that was really taken, but
it
so
does
glad
happen.
You found that.
It does happen. You'll find someone and you just don't click. For example, for my situation, they were interviewing me trying to figure out who would be someone who could help me, because it's not always that you get the therapist that would help you.
If I could briefly do a plug on that.
Please, yeah, go ahead.
If you're looking for mental health services, guys, goodness of fit is the number one. I mean, are they providing the type of therapeutic module you'd like, and do you relate to them? That's why we do 15-minute free meet and greets all. Look, I pride myself. I'm a pretty good psychologist, right? And I'm pretty good at certain areas, but I could be the exact wrong thing for somebody. And then if you're getting it, think about what you want, and then read a bit about therapies, different therapies. Do you want talk therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavior therapy? Do you want to do groups? Do you want to do individualized? Like, there's a lot of mediums, and it's important that you take a role in your treatment and that you are one of the ones driving it.
Yeah, I think that's something I'd like to go ahead and start discussing too. And we are leading a little bit after 2 hours, so maybe we won't go too much longer. But there are a couple topics, a couple things I do want to hit, and I may want to answer just a couple of questions from chat. So if you guys have any questions that you want to ask during this entire conversation we've had, and you're like, hey, we can't go like super in depth and like have a straight therapy session for that question, but just general things that you would like to ask, we can go ahead and do a quick response on that. I think it's exclamation point questions or something. We'll bring that up. I can probably even do that real quick. Let me do that. Oh, it's so far away with my setup. Okay, I can see it. All right, cool. But I would like to say, when we're talking about ourselves and when we need help and things that we are going through, what can our expectations be of other people around us when we need help? I think that we did talk about that a little bit, but I feel like we need to solidify that for anyone who may be listening to this and need help. What are expectations of our friends, of people maybe when we're going to get therapy, people we don't know but we feel close to in some way in a leadership role? What should we be expecting of other people? And I guess, Sophie, if you don't mind, I'd like to hear your opinion on that too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends, right, on your relationship with them. I generally advise people not to go to someone who you're not like, don't go to a streamer and
Mhm.
like talk to them about like your like
Mhm.
privately about like your deep struggles. Like go to a friend, go to someone in your support system. Outside of that, I would say that I'm not sure if evaluating your expectations of a friend is a good thing to do in the moment. Because I think like when you're at least for me, when I've been in like my darkest states of mind, like I know that like I've been extremely paranoid or like just like thought whatever, like all sorts of different things about the people that I've talked to and reach out to. I think that's something usually to evaluate later and like think like, you know, did is this what I like expect from a friend? And if and that's going to be different from person to person, I think.
Yeah. And I do want to backtrack for just a second. We are getting closer to running out of time. So if you have questions, I am going to put this on YouTube. What I'd recommend, actually, if you don't mind, is ask your questions there, and I'll link this to all the guests so they can come back and answer some of your questions if you'd like. I feel like that would be the best way so we don't cut into too much time here and everything else, because I'm thinking about this right now, and our questions can have very long answers. I don't even feel like we've been here for over 2 hours, but we have. And so, yeah, if you guys have questions, we'll save that for the YouTube side of it and the comments and everything. And we'll be more than happy to answer that. Gouka, I guess from your point of view too, you were kind of in a situation to where you needed help, and I guess it might be good for you to tell everyone what you think people's expectations should be of others when you do need help.
Like what I would expect of them. God, I mean, this is a matter of should expect from them, and
Well, I think better of what you can, because what's acceptable in a reasonable way that you have, because it should is such a hopeful thing, and we're not, especially when we need help, we're not always going to be in a hopeful situation, I think.
yeah, I mean, if I'm being grim, I don't think you can have any expectations because you really don't know how that person's gonna respond to what you're saying. Just logically, that's why I was like thinking about the can versus should. I, just based on my experiences, I didn't, to this day, like now, if I were to do this again, I wouldn't really have any expectations just because, those worldviews that I had back then just kind of shattered in that moment. Yeah, it's a bit dark, but that is kind of how I see it right now.
So I guess a follow-up to be like, what would you be hopeful that people could kind of respond in a somewhat of a reasonable way, thinking about it as well? Like if someone was in a good situation, kind of what we were talking about earlier though, right? Would you say just them listening and being kind of reflective and having that discussion with you, would that be something that you would just be hoping for?
Yeah, exactly. I think the reflective talk is a very big deal because at the very least, you are trying to empathize with them. And I think that is what this comes down to, is exercising empathy by understanding what's happening, what their situation is. And even if you don't agree with them, like maybe they are upset about something that's really trivial or ridiculous. I've done that a lot in the past, especially, among endgame raiders that are just so full of themselves. But no matter what kind of nonsense came at my door, I was ready to at least pretend I'm like their biggest friend in the moment.
Okay. Dr. Kelly, do you want to say your piece on that too?
Sure. It's hard. Frosty, you had mentioned something I think pretty insightful a while back of everybody has their different strengths. Maybe it's someone you're incredibly close to, but they're just very empathic. They are empathic, but struggle to understand. Maybe they have Asperger's. I don't know.
Yeah.
But something where they just can't be for you there in a certain way, and it's not their fault. But there's something, I think, we are herd creatures. We all are based in herd mentality and altruism. Buffalo, monkeys, meerkats. I mean, we're
Right.
among that type of brain that has evolved and survived for thousands of years to adapt to the worst.
Mhm.
So a part of our brain is designed to, when things are bad and we're worried about our survival, and that's hyperbolic, but depressed or anxious or
Right.
whatever, that there is going to be usually some push to connect to something. And to hope that maybe there'll be a friend who can just be there, just to be present with you, just to be in a moment. They don't have to be a therapist, they don't have to be advice, just to listen and to exist can be nice. I mean, simply having a child and having, another peer or parent walk in, just that alone will increase oxytocin, which makes people feel connected, attached. It's the same thing that a baby will match his mother's heart rate with, because of her heart rate with. It's the same reason that a mother lactates when, her baby cries. The same thing that'll happen when you're in love with somebody and they come line and you feel connected. You can provide that simply by being with someone. So to be present in the moment with somebody, expectation, I think, is, if you have a friendship with them, which
Right.
alludes that you have intimacy already,
Yeah.
right? Friendly or platonic or romantic.
Yeah. Well, we are kind of getting to that point to where we need the wrap up and everything. And again, these topics could go for very, very, very long. And maybe we need to do a visit towards this topic again in the future. You guys have been fantastic on the show, by the way. It really means a lot that you all came on for it and gave us different experiences and thoughts on this. And I do want to take a second before we do all of our closing remarks, because you do have, I know we were talking about resource dropping and everything else, but it is important to have these resources available in some way for people who may be able to use them and make use of them. And Dr. Kelly, you do have some of those resources. Would you mind telling everybody and giving a little bit of information about them?
Sure. Gosh, I think a better format might be, is there a way that I can provide links somewhere if people wanted
in chat.
it?
Well, I think I can in chat.
Okay.
Let me,
Well,
I
and
can
I'll-
put it on YouTube as well. Like, I'll put it in the description. But go ahead.
Yeah, we can do that. That'd be great. I'm sorry, I should have thought about
That's fine.
one thing that I don't mind. I don't have a presence like Spofie has, so I still have the luxury to some extent. If you want to connect with me on Twitter and ask about resources, I can sort of tell you a few things we have. Again, like Frost said, I'm not going to be your therapist, but if you have questions
Right.
about this discussion, anything I've said, resources that we've talked about, don't hesitate to let me know. I'll type.
Yeah, let me. I think I have to give you permission, so let me
Oh,
permit
I'm
you
sorry.
real quick. No, it's
Yeah.
fine. You're on the Geek account.
You can do Geeks Like Us, and then my
got it.
Twitter account's the main thing to do. So Dr. R. Kelly
Okay, so
on Twitter, and I can provide Frosty you with all those things that you can provide viewers.
absolutely, I'll go ahead and do that. And so they can find you on Twitter with Dr. R. Kelly, right?
That'd be the best place.
Which is a great name again. But and do you have any last words that you want? I guess this is a good point to do the sign off stuff. Then, do you have any other last words you'd like to say to everybody before we close up the show?
Yeah, absolutely. Just the thing I say is there is a U-shaped space in this universe that only you can fill. And at a physics standpoint, if we removed you, the actual matter of you, everything would collapse. And so very literally, you matter, right? And there's no one else who can be you better than you. And you are needed for everything else to exist. You're theistic or not, that's a reality. So the idea is try to be you, right? Come up with an ideal version of and become it. Work towards it. Find support along the way. You don't need to do it alone. And, along the way, take care of yourself, love yourself. Your feelings and thoughts matter, and you need to act that way, or else you will subconsciously believe that they don't.
That's going to be very hard for our other guests to top here in their closing statements. I'm going to, Gouka, I know you don't do a lot of streaming or anything else, but any last words that you'd like to say, and anything else that you want to say before we get off the show?
Well, I guess my like takeaway in this is, like I said, I don't believe in just like preaching principles. I'm not going to tell you like you should be this way or shouldn't be that way. I used to be, but that's not my style anymore. Instead, I would say just keep these ideas and topics on your mind, because it's a lot like racial bias, where, you know, if you are looking for racial bias, you might find it where it doesn't exist. But if you don't even have it on your mind, you're going to miss it where it exists. And so if you keep these topics on your mind, you know, when you encounter it, you're going to you're going to recognize it. And a good example of this was a player that I met that had some issues, and a lot of people memed on this player because as a result of those issues, they make a lot of like silly statements, and they were actually on the chat for MogTalk for a while. And a lot of people thought that this was my alt account, just like trolling people. But yeah, but
I don't even
it wasn't
remember it.
actually. Yeah, it wasn't. And this person asked for various things, and they're not someone I would have normally interacted with, but because these topics were on my mind and reminded me of my little sister, who actually suffers from an assortment of illnesses, I took the time to help them out with whatever they had going on. And, you know, that's kind of the difference that keeping things on your mind will make throughout your day.
No, yeah, and now I remember. Yeah, I remember that clearly. That was a long time ago. That was really long. But anyways, sorry. We're going to get off into another tangent. Spofie, would you like to tell everyone where they can find you in all your last thoughts here?
Yeah, sure. I stream at twitch.tv/Spofie. I'm in the chat. But yeah, I think I do come from it from a different perspective. Like I kind of want to like my final words to be speaking about kind of streaming, just because that's the perspective that I am here. And I think as a 14 player, and from what I've seen with streaming, I just want to really urge people to, I guess, echo and be mindful, and like don't be afraid to like, I mean, every community, every streamer, every FC, every static, everything that you're gonna, every sort of like subgroup that you're gonna find yourself a part of by playing a massively multiplayer game is gonna be different. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with, there's nothing wrong with you, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that group if you don't find yourself fitting in. Like just be willing to like try different things, and like, you know, if a certain, like, you're uncomfortable like with a certain streamer or a certain FC, like don't be afraid to like go talk to other people and stuff, because like, I don't know, that's one of the hardest things I've seen, is people feeling like super stuck, when in reality, like, there's nothing wrong with them and there's nothing wrong with that group. It's just maybe it's not a good fit. So just like trying to push yourself to try new things is really good.
Okay.
Awesome.
You guys all followed up pretty well. Sorry, I completely underestimated all of you. But yeah, guys, thank you so much for spending your time with me today. All the viewers, the people on the show, the mods, and everything else. Again, if you would like to ask questions on YouTube, feel free. I'm going to put links and everything. Dr. Ryan Kelly will give me lots of links that I can give to all of you in case you are looking for resources and ways that you can help or be helped. I think that will be posted on there. The other things that I would like to say, just some quick administrative things with me, is that I am going to be doing, again, the World Race stream at the beginning of next month, and we are forming our team to do that. We're hoping to have a pretty heavy team of like 20-ish or so people kind of running these things as a 24/7 stream during the event. And so if you're interested in that as a person who likes to stream, a person who likes to commentate, whether it's host purely or analytical, if you're a person who likes to track the race and how it's going, we need people of all roles to help us out, and it's going to be a completely volunteer event that we're doing for charity. And so we haven't locked down the exact charity we're going to be using, but we are going to do a complete just fundraiser, and all the money will go straight. If it's on my channel for that month, it's going to it. Like subs, everything that I have will go towards it. To benefit this charity. And so keep that in mind. I will be looking for people, and if you want to be a part of that, just contact me either on Twitter or wherever. Email me at frostyffxiv.com or at gmail.com. Sorry. there's something else. I want to make sure I had a list, and I don't want to forget anything else here. I think that was the most important one. Oh yeah, and so again, Dr. Ryan Carey. Why do I want to say Carey? I don't know why I want to say Carey.
I'll change it.
Dr. Ryan Kelly, thank you for coming on and giving us your time.
Of course.
You were
glad to do it.
Fantastic. Hope it made me feel a little bit less insecure about me just saying stuff blatantly and expecting it to be true. And thank you, Spofie and Gouka, for coming on and giving your experiences. Again, it meant a lot to have those perspectives here. That being said, I do have a little Patreon video that I show at the end to thank the people because it was an incentive, and so we have that coming up too. And until then, next week, whenever we do next show, have a wonderful time. Be good, keep cool, stay frosty. Bye, guys. Ryan, you gotta do it. Yeah, there you go. Man, yeah. Well, I'm sure a fucking fantastic show. Discussion was terrific, and guests were amazing. But what the hell is this? Why are you watching me right now when the show is over, right? Yep, it is. It's over. But this is a bonus video due to the efforts of people with either too much money or they just really want to support the show because they have the ability to give. I don't know. I don't know why people reach this incentive. Or they just love me saying their name. I don't really get it. But at the end of each week's episode, I will be doing a special thank you to the few who are in the most premium tier of the Patreon support for the show. Since I launched it, for some reason, they wanted to do that. This week, those few are Dude, It's Antonio, a fucking fantastic MogTalk supporter. I've been with the show for almost its entirety. Also, there's Super Miu, who runs the Teamcraft website and is an extremely amazing developer overall. And on that note, we also have another amazing member of the community who works with the Morning project, Nimic, who has joined the ranks of the people with either too much money or just like me saying their name. I really don't know which one. So what do I do on this video that's so amazing? Nothing. This is a completely off-the-cuff video made every week to say thanks. But this week I do have a little something. I've been recently practicing with an instrument, and I will display some of my skill here for you today. It's a very difficult thing I've been working on. So let me get it out. All right, and let's see. We can do this. Thank you for that. That's rough. I've spent a lot of time working on that. But again, that was dedicated to Dude, It's Antonio, Super Miu, and Morning. I apologize for the lack of episodes recently, by the way, and thank you, videos that haven't really been happening because there was no episodes. But as we venture our way into the next patch, things are going to get pretty busy and probably pretty exciting. Again, thank you very much to all the Patreon supporters and literally anyone who takes the time to listen to the show. And until next time, see ya. Bye.